in a minute, but I, at the moment, open the proceedings. Before we start the meeting, I have a few housekeeping announcements to make. There are no planned fire alarm tests today. If you hear the fire alarm, please leave by the nearest fire exit and make your way to the agreed assembly point, which is at St John's Churchyard off Druid Street. Council security staff will be available to direct you. Public toilets are located off the main reception area. There is a refreshment machine for use by members of the public in the waiting area outside this meeting room. Finally, please switch your mobile phones to silent whilst in the meeting room. This meeting is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. So if you address the committee, please do not disclose any information you do not wish to be in the public domain. Members of the public are welcome to film, audio record, photograph, or post on social media the public proceedings of the meeting. I'd ask you to please be considerate towards other people in the room and take care not to disturb the proceedings. If you're filming the meeting, please do not film the audience. You're welcome to use our free guest Wi-Fi at Southwark. No login is required. During the meeting, members of the committee will not access the internet except as it relates to the official business of the meeting. They will not send or receive emails, text messages, or post on social media concerning the business of the committee. I would also like to remind speakers to use their microphone when speaking, as only the audio from the microphone is captured on the live stream, and not to place their mobile devices next to the microphone to avoid interference. Have we received any apologies for the meeting? I'm aware of Councillor Johnson and, of course, Councillor Soames. Nobody else, thank you. Please will the voting members of the committee indicate by raising their hands. The addendum report and the members' pack have been circulated. Does any member wish to declare any interest or dispensation in respect of any item or issue to be considered at the meeting? This is the point in which I have to declare that the first item on the agenda regarding the boatyard, I'm so sorry, it's item 6.1, so sorry. I have had dealings with people in the boatyard, so I will not be chairing at this point. Right. Can we agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of May 2025 as an accurate record of the proceedings? Members to agree? Agreed. Thank you. The next item of business concerns the determination of planning applications. I would like to remind everyone of the committee guidance on the conduct of business. Firstly, officers will present the report, outline their recommendations, and answer questions raised by the committee. 2, if present and wishing to speak, the following may then address the committee for no more than 3 minutes each. 1 spokesperson representing any objectors to the application. By now you need to have identified a single spokesperson. If more than 1 objector wishes to speak, the time will be divided accordingly within the 3-minute time slot. Then the applicant or their agent, 1 spokesman representing any supporters of the application who live within 100 metres of the development site, and a ward councillor representing the area affected by the proposal. Each speaker should restrict their comments to the planning aspects of the proposal and should avoid repeating information which is already in the report. At the end of each representation, the committee may ask questions of the presenter. After receiving all submissions, the committee will debate the application and consider the recommendation. This is a council committee meeting which is open to the public, and there should be no interruption from the audience. Finally, I would like everyone present to know that although this planning committee comprises of members of different political parties, we are not politically whipped. Our decisions are made in accordance with the council's planning policy and based on the information contained within the relevant reports, together with consultation responses and any verbal submission made today. Right, at this point, I'm going to ask the committee if they are in agreement with Councillor Livingston taking over as chair while I will sit in the audience. Is that okay? Thank you. Thank you. Right. Keep that there for you.
Thank you, everyone. That brings us on to item 6.1, South Dock Marina. I'd like to ask officers to.
So members will remember that this application was 6th of May and it was agreed. Approval was given subject to business relocation strategy and a affordable workspace strategy being included and agreed by the planning committee following further consultation with the affected businesses, considering the phasing of affordable rents, position of small businesses and support available for businesses not willing or to remain on site. The criteria set out in policy E33 and on-site storage. By way of a reminder, this is the site in question, the redevelopment of the South Dock Marina Boatyard, 5 new boatyards, workshops and facilities, new 50-ton crate, additional workshop and studio space, small business, cafe, community event space, welfare facilities, residential berth holders, and ancillary disabled car parking, cycle storage, refuse storage, landscape and accessing. There is an addendum to this item which deals with some of the late comments received. We will discuss those during the course of this presentation, and if there's any questions from the addendum, we can come back to them after. So page 4 of the member pack, or 3, details the further engagement that has taken place within the addendum. There's a further breakdown of discussions with existing. So the applicant undertook further engagement with existing businesses, sending them questionnaires and information on the strategy, organised a number of meetings. 13 of the 18 businesses that currently operate from the boatyard attended the meetings. We do have additional information on 5 businesses that didn't engage in that process. And whilst it's correct that the 5 businesses did not attend the recent meetings about the relocation and workspace strategies, all businesses were sent the consultation slides and scoping questionnaire. Of the 5 businesses that didn't engage, 2 of them responded to the questionnaire, 1 staying and requesting additional units if available, 1 planning to stay subject to rent. 1 business separately confirmed their intention to stay, 1 business has relocated but retains empty premises, 1 business is planning to stay during the decant and will use this time to wind down their business. Overall, officers are satisfied that the applicant took all practical steps to engage with the existing businesses. In terms of the affordable workspace strategy, some concern was raised around the levels of affordability of the workspace rents. And a letter received from Southwark Law Centre details we expressly asked for further evidence justification on the approach to calculating market rents. In response to this, we have information from the applicant and also from the council's Assistant Director on Property, who has provided a separate note which you will find within the addendum, attached to the addendum pack. So in terms of the response, all boatyard businesses privately own containers they operate. The context of these containers is that the council has charged a business to pitch their container within a disused car park, part of the boatyard compound, via a licence. As a meanwhile use for many years, whilst the development proposals have been progressed. The current pitch costs have been frozen since April 23 for a standard 40-foot container. They are £2,500.40 annum for a container pitch at ground level. And if you look at that on a square footage basis, that equates to £8.03 per square foot per annum. And £1,911.24 for a container stacked on top of another container. And again, if analysed on a square footage basis, and this equates to £5.97. Sorry, sorry.
Thank you for that.
Thank you
Yes,
for
it's
letting me know.
definitely worth everybody remembering that these new microphones, you need to talk a little closer.
Okay, is that better?
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, move it. So the business relocation strategy. So it just concludes on the affordable workspace strategy. The applicant will meet the 10% affordable workspace requirement, given the support that will be provided to existing businesses to assist their relocation to the new boatyard. It's concluded that the overall affordable workspace provision will exceed the minimum policy requirement. The 30% discount market rent will exceed the discount that has been delivered elsewhere in the borough and demonstrates the commitment of the applicant in supporting existing and future businesses on the boatyard site. The business relocation strategy, and if we go to the next slide, no, this one. All businesses will be able to relocate to the new development. Specification of the new units has been informed by consultation with existing businesses. Existing businesses will move from a licence arrangements to a standard leaseholder agreement with Southwark Council. No annual rental increases. The only rent review will be at lease renewal stage. And slide 7 shows the DINCAT process. And what you see within slide A is the construction site, and slide B shows the decant retained for boatyard businesses, and D is for the temporary accommodation for other businesses, and C is where the crane is. The support that will be provided for the existing businesses that remain are set out with packages of assistance. This is discount market rent, 30% for existing marine businesses and 15% for non-marine businesses, but with now additional support provided. Financial support to cover transportation or disposal of container, financial support for removal costs of container contents during decant and recant, financial support for business advice, and support to cover council's professional fees, additional support now provided, and financial support to cover solicitors' fees. There are several tables detailing the potential rental costs over a 4-year period in the addendum. And this takes examples of £30 per square foot and £25 per square foot, and these are reflecting 2024 the rents were closer to £30 per square foot, and in 2025 this year the rents are slightly lower, but the rent level will be set at the point of what the rents are at that time. So slide 9 shows the transitional rent over a 4-year period, which is now increased from what was previously 3 years. So you can see that the difference with existing marine businesses and the discount offered, and the non-marine micro businesses and discount offered via through year 1, 2, 3, 4, and then at year 5 reaching the 100%. The rate cap on new leases of £30 per square foot and transitional service charge. Total financial support is about £13,000 per business. Support is also provided to those existing businesses who decide to leave the boatyard, and financial support is to cover the cost of transporting containers elsewhere in the UK for its disposal, removal costs for contents of the container, business advice and support, financial support for property agent advice, financial support for solicitors' fees, with a total financial support for about £6,800 per business. So in conclusion to the updated business relocation strategy, the applicant will provide support to all of the existing businesses within the boatyard site, regardless of whether they intend to remain at the boatyard or relocate elsewhere. The strategy demonstrates that the proposed development has been phased to ensure that all businesses will be provided temporary accommodation whilst construction is taking place, and that financial support will be provided to facilitate decant and recant into new units and agreeing the new leases. The overall package of financial support for the entire boatyard is estimated to be in excess of £284,000. As there are some businesses that have not confirmed as to whether they will be remaining or leaving, the boatyard is still recommending that a final version of the business relocation strategy is submitted prior to the commencement of the development, and this will be secured in a legal agreement. Another issue that's been raised in the latest submissions is around storage. And we can see on this slide the proposed storage containers to be located within Area B. A request for additional storage was made by Southwark Law Centre and the Marina residents. And this is due to an issue around fire risk being identified from storing items on the pontoons. So the addendum addresses this point within paragraph 17, which says it's assumed that the request for additional storage in Southwark Law Centre's letter is made in the context of restrictions on storing personal items on the South Dock and Greenland Dock pontoons. This pontoon clearance work is an operational response to the recent fire risk assessment and entirely outside the scope of the boatyard development. As a further point of note, the terms of the berth holder tenancy agreements explicitly specify that items must not be stored on the pontoons for safety reasons. Separate conversations have taken place with residents about this issue at a meeting on the 22nd of April 2025, attended by ward councillors. Residents and the Marina team berth holders were presented with the option of moving their items to either temporary storage at the nearby Waterport Sports Centre during the boatyard construction period, or to small storage lockers in a shared 20-foot container at the boatyard in the final scheme. A further point was made in the late response to the community garden and its reprovision. This is again addressed in the addendum at paragraphs 18 to 22. The references to other open space, and this is a spatial policy designation, and the Southwark plan sets out the definition of other open space as private space which is of benefit to local community. However, the policy is expressed in terms of policy and its definition being applied to adopted open space designation. In this case, other open space. The dockyard area is not an adopted other open space and is therefore not shown in the Southwark Plan Policies map or listed in the appendix as other open space. And in the addendum, you can see a GIS map. You can see the layer, and you can see that the nearest other open space that's designated is in Tawny Way, but there's none in the marina itself. The Southwark Law Centre letter also refers to transitional charges and guarantees that these will not be imposed. The applicant has clarified that a service charge will apply and that this would be introduced on a transitional basis. No service charges for years 1 and 2, then service charges will apply from year 3 onwards. At the 11th of June meeting, the applicant committed to cover legal and professional fees. Therefore, businesses will no longer be required to pay the transactional fees that the council would normally require any new tenant to pay when entering a new lease. That's detailed on paragraph 14 of the addendum. Conclusion, the recommendation remains that planning permission should be granted subject to the conditions and completion of the legal agreements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have questions on Councillor Tester?
Thank you for that. That was really helpful. I was wondering, just as a point of clarity, sorry, bear with me. I wasn't at the previous meeting for this one, so I'm not particularly familiar with this application. But I think there was a point in the, that's it. So am I correct in reading the report that the discounts or the kind of the fixed rents will be in place for 30 years? but there's also kind of a separate point in the report about there being an affordable workspace provision of 10% there in perpetuity. And I wasn't quite sure how that would work if those rents were only fixed for 30 years. I just wondered if you could clarify that for me.
I mean, my understanding is from a policy perspective, we are required to run the affordable workspace for a period of 30 years.
Okay, Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Chair. I want to ask about the community garden. So this point was raised in the Public Law Centre letter, and you addressed it as well. There's a to and fro with the council and the Law Centre about the definition of other open space. We came up in the last committee, and it was addressed in the meeting, and then there is a response which in the addendum report, which basically concedes that other open space can include private open space. So I suppose the point being made that we heard before around the lack of public access to the site is not relevant because the definition includes private open space that's of benefit to the community. But so the council has kind of moved on to a different argument about this, which is that it does not count as other open space because of a, this is a slightly sort of technical discussion, but it's around how the area is designated within the Southwark Plan, I believe. But I wonder if you can maybe outline this a little bit further. I think the thing that I would be keen to understand is whether there is anything about the space itself that does not meet the definition of other open space, or whether the council's contention here is just around its designation in the Southwark Plan, which is kind of what it seems to be going from the addendum report.
Yeah, sorry, because I wasn't present at the previous one, and my colleagues potentially, but my understanding is that other open space is designated open space and in the plan. So every area that's designated as other open space is protected in that way, and that's what has been put out in the addendum, and that was the information given from policy colleagues as to what is other open space. So I think just to be clear, it is a defined space, and it is actually listed within the Southwark Plan.
What I'm sort of keen to understand is whether the space itself meets the definition of other open space, or whether what planning is saying is just that it was not previously designated as such, because presumably that could have been a mistake. You know, it could be that it should have been designated as such because it meets definition of other open space, which is what the Law Centre is saying that it is.
So I think there's the two reasons. In the addendum at paragraph 22, it quotes what was in the previous officer report. And so those are the reasons why it's not considered to qualify under the policy. And then also it has not been designated. So the policy P57 is not considered to apply.
Sorry, Michael, just so it's difficult for us to adjudicate these definitions. However, the quote from the original report makes a point of saying that there is no public access or routes to the site. Primary use of the site is a working boatyard. Officers therefore do not consider the site to qualify as open space. The Law Centre letter points out other open space expressly includes private open space, which is of benefit to the community. And then the addendum report, following the quote, concedes that there is a bullet in the plan that states private open space, which is of benefit to the local community. Private open space, in other words. So the way that I read this is that the addendum report is conceding the point that the original reasoning in the report that we had read they seem to have ceded the argument there to what the law centre was saying, and it has moved on to a secondary argument which was not previously mentioned, which was the second thing that you said, around its designation in the plan. And what I'm saying is that if the only kind of remaining point here is around how the open space was originally designated, or how it's designated in the plan, is it not the case then that it should have been designated as such previously, and that what the issue is here is that it was incorrectly designated if it meets the definitions, if it actually meets the criteria to be considered other open space?
Dennis, do you want to go in here?
Thank you, Councillor Foster. So the designation process for metropolitan open land, borough open land, and other open spaces is the same process that we create and consult on the new SADC plan, which is the document that you have to be making decisions on. So sites are put forward for designation through various means. It could be local residents that put forward the site for inclusion in the SADC plan under those three designations. So the last round, obviously, which created the SADC plan 2022, did not include this site. Whether it met the criteria for designation as other open spaces is not something that we can speculate on. The point is that this site before you, in arriving at your decision, is not designated under this other plan. So that is the position we have in respect of this open space. I mean, we understand that it is obviously of obvious amenity value, sentimental value to the residents, but it's not designated under the SADC plan. That is the position.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I suppose, no, this is helpful. I mean, I suppose the purpose of having such designations is because of the nature of the area that the designation applies to, that there's a recognition in the plan that those areas have a particular value that planning and development should respect and retain. So from our position as committee members making a decision here, and I guess it presumably should be the view of the council in general, that if there are areas that have the amenity value or the value to the local community meeting those definitions, that the plan itself should seek to protect them accordingly. Particularly if the original officer report did not make a valid argument about why it didn't meet the definition, because it's notable that the argument has changed. The conclusion was the same, but the argument has changed. So in the interest of our decision, taking into account what the kind of material considerations are behind the definition, you know what I mean? That is the point of there being such a designation in the first place, is to protect types of spaces. If there is agreement on the point that it should be protected in that way, in its characteristics, I suppose, even if it is not designated as such under the plan, I think that the committee should take it into it.
So I think 2 points. The first would be that, of course, as Dennis said, Mr. Sangwame, if you consider that the community space has amenity value, that it's important, that it should be protected, that is something that you can consider when reaching your decision. But the question raised by the Southwark Law Centre is whether the spatial designation in policy P57 applies, which says essentially that development will only be allowed in exceptional circumstances. And when considering whether that policy is triggered, the point, as Dennis said, is that it has not been designated. And frankly, we don't know why. We don't know if it was put forward. We don't know why. That's all we know, is that it hasn't been designated. And so, of course, it could be material to your decision making in terms of considering if you consider it has value and that should be protected. But the advice from the policy team is that this is a spatial designation policy and it has not been designated. And so that policy test is not triggered.
Thanks, Michael. I suppose my final comment on this is just that it seems like the council's case is significantly weaker now than it was when we previously discussed this, based on the discussion we've just had and the back and forth between the Southwark Law Centre and the planning officers.
I'm going to take that as a comment rather than a further question. That's all right, Sir Councillor Foster. I'm sure it's a matter that we can consider when we're coming to. I expect we're not going to get any different answers at this stage, because I think, yeah. And Councillor Tester.
Thank you. I was just coming back on my earlier point because I found the paragraph that it relates to. So paragraph 19 of the report, it says that on the officer assessment part that the proposed affordable workspace provision of a minimum of 10% in perpetuity. And I think that was why I was trying to get a bit of clarification as to what that actually means. Does that mean that there will be a 10% affordable workspace provision on here, on this site forever? And then what would that look like in terms of the rents that are being secured? Because I know that the report says that our normal affordable workspace provision kind of requirements are different to what is being proposed in this instance. So I just wanted to clarify that point.
Thank you. Yes, there is a 10% that would be remain in perpetuity at the affordable rent level.
Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Chair. I wanted to ask about the rent levels. So there's a lot of information on the presentation, but there's still a big gap between what the businesses have requested and what the council proposal is, at least in terms of what the final rent is, understanding that there are all these discounts and so on. Naturally, businesses plan for the long term rather than for a 5-year basis, so they'll be, concerned about what the ultimate rent is going to be. I wanted to get some more information, if we could, on the kind of benchmarking exercise. I appreciate that the business's own comparison exercise has comparisons that are outside of London, but they contend are more similar in their nature than the calculation of market rent by the council. The response on this only essentially reasserts the conclusion. I'm looking at paragraph 9 here, which is page 4 of the report, the addendum report. I'm just saying the head of property has confirmed that the rental areas on offer are considered to reflect the location of the boatyard in central London and the specialist nature of the lettable spaces. So I suppose it doesn't really give any additional arguments on that. It just kind of restates the position. So it would be good to get any information that you might have on the process that was undertaken to calculate the market.
Dennis has just pointed that the second document we got on the addendum might have a bit.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Sorry, I hadn't looked at this secondary addendum, so I might need a moment to read through that before continuing discussion on that. So, Chair, if you want to go. Seems like everyone.
That's fine. Yes. Yes. People have opportunity to read that. Are there any further questions from members? Thank you for raising that one, Councillor. So that was definitely a question I had. So I haven't read enough of this addendum either. So thank you very much for pointing that out. Very helpful. Okay, so the most relevant bit is what's on the final page, isn't it? Where you've identified a number of other boatyards, which includes Chichester and Chatham, also includes Eastbourne, Sondart, wherever that is, Hamble and Hayling Island. I don't know where Sondart is, but I've heard of the other. Southwest somewhere. To be fair, yeah, it says it under there. Should have read for Painting Dark. Okay. Helpful. Thank you. Right. Are there any questions arising from that? Councillor Foster, having had a chance to read that, is there anything that John doesn't remember the committee?
Sorry, Emmanuel. I can't find what I was
Okay.
looking
No,
for.
Thank you, Councillor Manuel. Yes, so
It's a
there were
document that's
two
simply-
addendum reports. So I think there was a second 4-page document that was tucked inside the addendum report, which is headed South Dock Marina Notes, is what it starts with, and it's got a number of tables on it. And it's the back page table which seems to have the comparisons on. Councillor Foster.
Sorry, I think we've all been, we're trying to figure this document out. So I think the final page, from what I understand, is the Southwark Law Centre's comparisons. Is that the case? That are sort of not recognised by property, largely on the grounds that they're not in London, or is that not? Because notably, they're all substantially cheaper in rents per square foot compared with the council's proposals. So presumably will not have been the basis of properties benchmarking because they're much cheaper.
I'm not sure whether officers can help us at this stage. This does strike me as it may also be something that's worth us talking to applicants.
Yes, I can answer, Chair. So the comparison from other law centre and the objectors related to Chichester and Chatham. So this the rest of the sites were picked up by our property team in their response to questions from the Southwark Law Centre. So you see from the letter that Southwark Law Centre circulated to members, they identified Chichester and Chatham as comparables for the South of Marina facility. The rest on this list here from our property.
Maybe we can return down with.
And what this does seem to suggest is there's nowhere comparable in London at all, although the page before perhaps explains why that's the case, because it does show the lack of vacancies at the other boatyards that might be within London, with the immediate London area, because some of these places on the Thames are just outside of London. So that's some context on that. Councillor Emanuel.
I found what I was looking for. It says the discount, the tenant stature, and the discounts from year 1 to 5. So it starts at 25%, which is £5.25. Then it goes to £10.50. Then it goes to £15.75, and then it goes to £21. Is that going to be the benchmark, and they're only going to pay £17.85 for the ones that had the 15%, and the one that had the 30% off, they're going to pay £14.70 at the end of that.
that's taking a stance as to what the rent levels will be. So I don't think you can take it as that's exactly what it's going to be. So they've used two different comparables, and the 24, which was at £30 a square metre, and then they've used the 25, where it was 25 in the beginning of this year. The rents were slightly lower, but they don't know what it's going to be when the actual building's constructed, and so it will be based on that final figure as to what the market and what the discounted amount.
Yeah, and I think that may well be something that you want to ask the applicants a bit more information about, I think. Okay. Have we got any further questions from Richie of this? In that case, could I ask whether there are any objectors to the application we have in front of us that would like to come forward? So those people who'd like to come and speak, please do come forward to the table in front of us. There are some spare cups I can see at the end of the table here if you want to make use of that water. I know it's a hot day for people. If you need it, please do take advantage of that. So what I'm going to do, so just to explain how we do this, you've got 3 minutes between you. I'll allow you both to introduce yourselves first before that time starts, and then I'll give you 3 minutes in which to speak. And after that, then committee may ask you some questions on what.
I'm Simon, a resident and tenant of the Boatyard and Marina.
I'm Alex Still, a resident of the South Dock Marina, and I'm running engineering services from this dockyard for the last 21 years.
Thank you both. You have 3 minutes between you, which to present to committee.
A prepared statement from residents and Suffolk Law Centre. First line is rates will still be unaffordable for many businesses. That's pertaining to small businesses. They've made it clear in consultation that they'll only be able to afford an increase of £12 per square foot, which will be reached after year one and then greatly exceeded. Even with discounts, some businesses will see a 2 times increase just after year one. Calculation of market rate at £30 per square foot is deeply flawed. It's based on a commercial space across all of Southwark, not taking into account location or niche market of the Boatyard. As such, a much more reasonable comparison would be the nearby yards, as previously discussed, of Chatham and Chichester at £10 and £9.80 to £11 per square foot. The council marine team has failed to justify this approach of the 3 times increase above these other boatyards, which notably are private operators. I understand that's addressed in the addendum. Policies per P31 and 33 apply to all small and independent businesses. We note the council's drive to preserve creative and cultural uses. Therefore, we ask that all existing businesses are given the same discount. The new documents propose a transitional service charge despite promises that there would be no additional charges. Also, we're talking about signatories of the support letter mentioned are the larger and more commercial businesses that can afford the increases. Many of them are less impacted by the proposals as they will maintain their current location and 24 access. The focus should be on providing affordable and suitable spaces for existing smaller businesses as per policy 31. Looking at on-site storage, there needs to be an increase in storage, not to retention of existing capacity. The impeding ban on storage on pontoons will greatly reduce capacity across the marina as a whole, which is going to make it very difficult for marina residents and in turn businesses to cope. This serves as a material consideration that should result in an increase in boatyard storage. Lastly, the community garden. We requested a photo to be put up. Is that possible? The photo. Thank you. The photo that was distributed is of the garden as it stands as a community asset. The council legal advice, the first committee was flawed and the garden is other open space because it is private open space which is of benefit to the community. It is not ancillary to or within the curtilage of a building. Policy P57 says development will not be permitted on other open spaces. unless there is exceptional circumstance. The development consists of replacement of other open space of equivalent or greater size or substantially better quality. This policy is wording is absolute, therefore replacement garden space is required. The community garden has been key social infrastructure for over 20 years. It is particularly important for Marina residents who live in confined space with no outdoor space.
Thank you. That's 3 minutes, including comments you like. Page. I'm
That's
sure
it.
there'll be questions from very much. I'm sure there'll be questions from members of the committee. Who'd like to start? Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for coming and making a statement. It would be interesting to hear if you could speak about your experience of the meetings and the consultations that have gone on since the last committee and what your experience has been like, whether you have felt sort of more heard by the council. We had heard at the last committee that there were some tensions in the relationship between businesses and the council, and I think we were hoping that, that there would be a productive process subsequently, that things would improve. So it would be just good to hear about what that has been like for you, and how you feel that that's gone.
Yeah, the general perception is that I haven't been, for example, myself as the initial consultation where the entire plan was developed. So I was kind of more engaged when the pre-made plan was presented to community. And then obviously lots of questions being sprung up, and lots of questions could not be asked there and now on the spot, because obviously certain things were still in progress or still reviewed and things. But for the business as such, in order to make a decision, stay or go, adjust, increase, take the apprenticeship, involve somebody else in some other capacities, you have a lot of information there, not like not after 12 months deliberations or consultations and changing the plans and readjusting, but now and there. So I found that the homework planning those things was slightly lucky in a way, that the businesses were provided the package of information actually in the last stages where the decision has to be made there on spot. For example, when we were asked to provide comparative rates, we only were giving 2 weeks to actually call companies around the country and find out if this one would be accepted or that one would not accept it. Although we, in the first consultation, 14 months prior, put this point that this needs to be done, this needs to be dug in and find out, and comparative rates needs to be found where they are. So unfortunately, it was a lot of things kind of being pushed forward right to the deadline where the final committee is going to sit, and then it's going to be all decided. So lots of people were upset because of the lack of this information and a lack of ability to make a decision, informed decision about the future and about engagement with their clients, so to say, because the clients are affected as well. The rates which we need to swallow, forget about the writing of workshops. This is the cost we have to just outright take. We will have then to pay more rents, and then this cost will be offset on our clients. And the clients, because of life crisis, they're already kind of on the last stage of what they can afford. So sooner or later, that means that these rents will affect not only businesses, they will affect the community even more, because they would not be able to pay our fees, our charges, and they will either neglect their boats, or they will sell their boats, or they will go somewhere else, and that will affect. So this, I found that predetermined decision was pretty big surprise anyway for the businesses. I don't know which businesses were involved in initial stages, but I, as a business for 20 years operating there, was involved already in the predeterminative stage where the plan is already laid out in front of you, and you have to say, what about this, or what about that, and then kind of deal with that on this stage. Nobody asks really like what you think, how that will affect you at the actually designing the proposal, rather than the whole thing was designed and then you were asked, is it going to do you? With a lack of information. So yeah, it was a tough things and a lot of problems which we're now dealing and you discussing in between yourself. They were on the record, being put in a lot of consultation where we say, listen, you have to do this and you have to do that. And always we would have a reply that, oh, don't worry about that now. We still don't have the planning permit, so we can deal about it later. Or like, oh, we're not there yet. After this date, we can do this package. But for the businesses, it might be too late. And for the client, it might affect them even further down the line. So yeah, it was a bit of a mixed feeling in a way that how the things were predetermined. Good.
Thank you. Councillor Tester.
Thank you. That was really helpful. You touched very briefly on the two sort of different types of businesses being charged different discounts. I was wondering if you could kind of expand on that a little bit.
So as I understand it, there's a 30% relief on the final rates, and that's for businesses that are seen as dealing with the boats specifically. So there's a lot of artists and creative folk in the marina who are integral part of the community. They would not qualify for that discount. I think since this statement was put together, a 15% discount has been offered for those people. But as the Law Centre points out, the policy should protect all businesses equally, not just the boat people.
Thank you. I had a question. So you specifically mentioned the price comparisons, and you mentioned the fact that the rate at Chatham was significantly lower than what was being proposed here. The information we've had put in front of us today as part of the addendum shows that actually at Chatham there's two different rates for two different sites there. So at the Rochester site, Strudham Rochester site, it is indeed sort of £10.38 per square foot. However, at the Gillingham site, it's £29.24, which obviously is quite close to the comparator that has been used in putting forward this. I don't know enough about those two sites to know how they might compare to this site. I don't know whether you have any information you could give.
Yeah, I do have, because I have acquired the price from the Turks Yard. The Turks Yard is based in historical yard facilities. It's a historical site. And what they are proud of is they're harboring their services and skills which are either go out of trade or having a hard time to sustain their living. So they have in shop, they have a propeller works and they have an engineering works and things like this. So I have acquired two different rates, and the one rate is to relocate an existing workshop into their premises, have it plugged in and have it wrapped up in the health and service system. And then the second quote was for the yard space. So that means that if I was using their workshop and I need certain area which I will rig up, because they operate in the yard. This is covered yard, so their workshop is immense. It could, it could contain a lot of space. So they kind of very keen to help the businesses who are struggling, providing them those spaces for those prices. That's why there is a one price to relocate the container as it is existing workshop of mine, and another one if I had to write off the container, what would be a floor space of the workshop price. I have submitted as well the letter to SouthDoc from a company which called ICM. They are in Rainham Marshes. They are auxiliary of the Tilbury Harbour. They have a workshop spaces there as well. and they operate a company previously was known as Walsh, who are aggregate transporters. So I did ask them because they are commercial entities, and I was interested what the commercial entities would actually offer in span of prices, and they pretty much matched the prices what Turk's Yard in Chatham would do. So it's about £12 per square foot per year for their workshops, and about 2,500 to relocate the container in their premises, and this includes electricity, parking, and all amendments and things. So it is difficult to compare why the marinas, for example, try to charge more certain businesses, and why the commercial entities can charge less in order to invite the businesses on their premises. I assume there is a certain skill shortages, and that's why the price variation come into the place.
May I add
Yes,
to the
please.
affordability workshops? There's also the argument that the community is dependent on craftspeople as well, artists and craftspeople. And if we look at the price of maker spaces in London, those are also considerably cheaper than prices being requested. I don't think we've got any examples, but I could also mark out about previous correspondence if that would be helpful.
Thank you. No, that's helpful. And I guess we can ask further questions like the applicants. Councillor Foster.
You mentioned that you've been given assurances there wouldn't be any ancillary charges, and then were informed that there would be. Could you tell us more about the assurances that you were given? In what form were you told that there wouldn't be a service charge?
I'm going to struggle to answer that because it's a prepared statement, not by me, and I'm not familiar with what those were. Ask. Sorry.
Okay. Well, what we can do again, we can ask the applicant about that if there's nobody here on the need to look at further. So thank you. Any further questions? I guess the one question that I had, this report that we're looking at today is quite specific in terms of its scope. So our previous meeting, the committee did make a decision that this development would go ahead, but there were 3 areas in particular we wanted more detail on before that planning agreement was given, some of which you've addressed today. So that was about the business relocation strategy, it was about the phasing of the affordable rents, so how they were phased, and thirdly, about the on-site storage. So, and you've obviously raised some other issues that the Southwark Law Centre has raised, where they think that perhaps there were things that we ought to consider when we made that decision before as well. But kind of, we'll obviously explore that a little bit with officers, but to some extent, as we can see, a very clear reason why you made an error there, that we therefore feel that our pre-decision is unsafe because of that. We're limited in terms of what we can do there in looking at those. So just in terms of those 3 specific areas, so about the business relocation strategy, about the phasing of the rents, and about on-site storage, is there anything else you think we need to consider that we've not heard so far?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll try to take us out of these things where we kind of jiggling the numbers and trying to adjust them to the final decision. We have quite a big meeting of the businesses who will be affected by the development, and that business was almost 2 years ago. And at that point, we just received the letter with indicative prices, and we sat together and say, listen, let's roll it all on the paper and let's see if we can deal with that. And none of the businesses could do that. And then we say, okay, if that rent will stay, what we're going to do. So everybody says, okay, I can't stay it, I can't afford it, I'm going to go with that. And obviously we can phase the things, and we can jiggle it, and we can throw a little bit money there and lock a bit of a percentage there. But if we don't reach that price, which is sustainable for the business, it's no point. It becomes a bit of a useless exercise where everybody just throws the numbers in the air and see how they fall, thinking that this will somehow change the situation. The situation is not being changed. If the rate goes over the 12 pound, which that's what we kind of got on our books, and considering our finances and how we offload those prices on our customer base, if we don't achieve that, then inevitably whatever we do, all these price exercises do not make any sense. And that's why phasing is important in order to induct the people into a certain level of payment, to give them the chance to relocate, to give them the chance to readjust their business operation, to pick up the trade, to chase the tail if they got some books and things. But it's only relevant when the final price is there and the final price could be achieved. And phasing is good. I don't mind any, only encouraged to do it, but phasing to what end? That's the question which everybody needs to actually ask themselves.
Hi, my name is Maria Vera. I'm a creative engineer and an artist. I have my studio in one of the containers in the yard. I just wanted to add to your point that also all the people that live in the marina and use the yard, they will have to absorb all the extra costs, and they're not the most richest people. So it's quite problematic if the prices of the maintenance and the jobs will go up naturally when the rents are also going up. It will be much more unaffordable for the entire community, not only for the businesses. And then, I just wanted to make a point about the compensation package. I think it would be really fair if ultimately, if there is an option of either the prices are affordable, or there is there is a compensation package for the people that can not stay. And at the moment, there is a huge compensation package. It's a very complicated story with legal compensation and coaching and all kinds of different aspects. But I think it would be much more helpful to have just the compensation in the form of money, because then we can just figure out our own goals and solutions instead of having to go to a coaching session and whatever, which is much less helpful to kind of absorb the stress and the relocation and finding a new studio and everything. It would be so much more helpful if it's just a compensation package in the form of money.
That's thank you. Okay, are there any further questions from members of committee at this stage? In that case, I'd like to thank you very much for coming along here. It's been really useful to hear your further evidence for us to consider as part of our decisions. If you'd like to return to the public seating area, and then I'd like to ask the applicants or the applicant's agent to come forward to address them. Thank you very much for coming to committee again. As I said to the objectors, what I'll do is I'll ask you to introduce yourself, and then I will give you 3 minutes in which to present to committee. There'll be questions from members of committee after
that. Thank you, committee. I am Adrian Smallwood. My job role at the council is that I am the natural environment asset manager. That means that I have responsibility for the marina as part of wider responsibilities, which include for commercial land matters. I'm a chartered surveyor.
I'm Phil Cotman. I am Harbour Master at Southdock Marina.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
We are here today as the committee has requested further consultation to take place with boatyard businesses within the limited remit of proposals and policies P31 and P33. The council as applicant has carried out further 4 consultation sessions where some businesses attended twice. Attendees were presented with further information on 4 topics, being a refresher on the design, including where their feedback had been incorporated into design changes, affordable workspace proposals, business relocation support, and temporary decant arrangements whilst the construction works had taken place. Every aspect of affordable workspace and business relocation policies were addressed within the presentations so that nothing was missed. We ask you to note that our proposals on these policies have been developed and communicated somewhat in advance of the usual timing of producing such strategies, where it is normally subsequent to the completion of the Section 106 agreement, so that the affected businesses would have greater certainty on what the future may hold and so be able to plan for that. We would like to stress that having listened to the community's comments and to the feedback from businesses, we have improved our offer on both policies, most significantly on the support package that is available for business relocation. Our offer now amounts to about £13,000 for a typical single container business, where the total support across all businesses in the boatyard, if fully utilised, is estimated at £284,000. To put this into perspective against the recent Borough Triangle business relocation support package, our support package is a greater sum, working out at an average of £3,000 better per business than per independent trader at Borough Triangle. This improved offer is supported by over half the boatyard businesses who are remaining in the boatyard. Turning to the various points raised by those businesses represented by the Southwark Law Centre, we understand that the only issues which relate to policies P31 and P33 are requiring further consideration by this committee. Whilst we believe that the rent agreed as part of the private lease negotiations are outside the scope of planning, we would point out that our methodology in setting indicative rental values is absolutely consistent with the approach that the council takes with all its business lettings elsewhere in the borough. Market rent valuations follow the normal and professionally regulated property industry approach of using comparable evidence to provide an appropriate figure, where our professional advisors have indicated a rental value between £25 and £30 per square foot. The notion that rent values at Southwark Marina should be only comparable to marinas many, many miles away is essentially flawed, as there is no specialist submarket of marina workshops, because there is nothing fundamental which creates such a submarket, operating at a discounted value to the wider local market. Research quoted by the council's head of property demonstrates that other marinas workshops to let have quoting rents which, as a minimum, mirror the levels of rent quoted for workshops in the wider local market. And in several cases, the marina workshops are more expensive. That is what we are not passing that on.
That is great, sir. So thank you very much for that. I don't know if any questions from members of the cluster.
Thank you. Sorry, that first. I was just wondering if there was any last points that you wanted to make, because I think we cut you off at the end there.
Thank you very much. Now, the very last point was that, as I was saying, that as such, the £12 per square foot offered by some businesses as a headline rent is unrealistic, as it's not supported by local evidence, and it also makes the development unviable.
Thank you. I'm sure we have a number of questions, but there's one I wanted to start off with, which was following on from the comments made by the objectors, that the final comment that was made was about the compensation package, and obviously a lot of the compensation is kind of support in kind with help to move and relocate, and some of the businesses were saying we'd find it a lot more flexible if you could just give a package of money. Is that something that could be considered?
Yes, that is something we consider.
Members of the committee, Councillor Foster.
Hi, Chair. Questions about the rent benchmarking, which you touched on. You mentioned that the normal process was followed of making standard comparisons, although it's been noted, by the objectors and in the materials we've got as well, that there is a limited availability for any direct comparison. So doesn't it stand to reason that although comparisons to marinas outside London clearly is different because they're in a different place with, the land value is not the same, by the same token that the standard approach is also less helpful in this instance because it's hard to directly compare within London, as compared to if you're working on a high street, for example.
it's not difficult to make a comparison. The fact that this is a boatyard is neither here nor there in terms of the rental valuation. Rental valuations are normally determined by location, quality, specification, and the critical factor here is use and user. Here, there is no restriction on that, and that is the only thing which will perhaps have a discounting effect on rent. And so, therefore, the comparator is with things of equal use, the same kind of use elsewhere. That is why, within I think the evidence that's been presented by the head of property, is the fact that the evidence is of similar type of use and type of nature of space, be it workshop, be it industrial, effectively a shed, elsewhere within the borough. And that is the basis of comparison. The fact that it is located within a boatyard setting is just wider context. And as the point I made just before is the fact that elsewhere it is seen as perhaps a premium value because of special nature. Because at the boatyard you have the additional facilities which are good for those particular trades, such as a crane and access to water. So the fact that it may still be all use class E is the same across the borough, and the values of class E across the borough are just used as a comparator.
Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Chair. So just so I can understand the process, so the as far as the valuations are concerned, there's not a consideration given to the value of retaining the small businesses that exist there. So we of course we heard before that the council was keen to retain its business community that exists there, but for the purposes of doing the valuations as you've outlined, that process is agnostic about the outcome, and essentially you might determine through a process of valuation that the rents are too low and thereby drive the current businesses away, and that would be the outcome of a kind of like a fair process as you have described it. Is that correct to say?
I don't believe that it's entirely fair to say that the fact that we are deliberately trying to drive away businesses. I think that
that's not what I said.
The essence of rent valuation is, as you say, is agnostic. It is effectively blind to a lot of things. Where we're wishing to bring sight to it is the fact that we are providing a large packet of support, be it phased rents, be it discounts, and other means by which we are trying to support and make and help businesses come from a very economical basis which they occupy and operate now, which is rather artificially low, into a situation where by development there is naturally going to have to be a change in circumstance. Change in circumstances drives a particular value. Some of that value is determined by viability, but also by the council's consistent approach on how it lets space. So we have offered as much as we can in terms of the support package, which is able to help the transition, the unusual position they are in now, into the future position.
Thanks, Chair. I just object to the characterisation of my comments made there. I didn't say that the council was deliberately trying to drive businesses away. I was seeking to understand the distinction between what the council has stated that it wants as an outcome, which is to retain businesses, and this aspect of rent setting, which, as you have outlined quite clearly, doesn't take that goal into account at all. So I think that's just an important thing to understand as we have this conversation. Clearly, the things, the conversation around the ramp up of the rents and the relocation strategy and all that are part of it as well. But I didn't assert that, and I just.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. I'm going to go to Councillor Parton.
Thank you, Chair. My question was around the consultation that was undertaken with businesses. So we talked about, I think some of the objectors raised their concerns around the unaffordability of the proposed rent phasing. And I'm keen to know if that appeared during the consultation process and how the council kind of incorporated those kind of comments into the rent figures before us now.
Yes, the topic did come up, and it came up in the context of the affordable workspace. And there was a difference of opinion about what the affordable workspace. definition of affordability is in the affordability strategy. And our interpretation of this policy is that it relates to delivering space at a rent which is at a discount to market rent. In that sense, the council believes it is discharging its duty. When it comes down to the level of rent, which is outside of that, in terms of the business relocation strategy, to businesses moving from the current circumstances to, again, we listened to their comments and have in the interim offered an additional discount where there was none before to the non-marine businesses. Does that answer the question?
Thank you. Councillor Tester.
Yeah, thank you for kind of the points of clarification that you've made so far. I wanted to pick up on one of the points that you were saying in response to Councillor Foster around there being kind of the market rent sort of setting basis being on the idea that it's about the kind of, it's not really about the businesses that are using it, it's about the kind of type of the property that are in there. And I wanted to, with that in mind, ask for a little bit more detail about why the two different types of businesses are being charged, are being proposed to have different levels of discount. We've heard from the objectors that doesn't necessarily seem to be well explained in the report and in policy. So I was wondering if you were able to kind of tell why that is the case.
So there are two different types of discount. The discount of 30% is being offered to marine businesses. The boatyard is there for repair of boats. So we are really keen to encourage boatyard businesses that repair boats to remain in the boatyard. Originally, those businesses which were not seen as a marine business would have been charged the full rate. However, having listened to the businesses through the consultation, those businesses which are still current businesses in the boatyard, so those which aren't marine businesses but are current tenants, will have a 15% discount. Any new businesses coming in, they're not marine, would pay the full rate. Your question?
Yes, it does. It answers the question, but I think the question that I'm actually asking is why is that the case? Is it because you're particularly keen to retain those marine businesses and therefore not so bothered if some of the other businesses do have to move out because it's unaffordable? I think that's the point that I'm trying to get at, is the why. It's not the function of how it's happening.
So the council needs to get best consideration for property we rent, which would be the rent that we've been advised. However, there is ability to offer a discount based on exceptional circumstances, and being a boatyard, those discounts have been added to the marine businesses to encourage marine businesses in the boatyard to make the boatyard viable.
Thank you. Any further questions from members of the committee? Councillor Foster?
It's just, I wanted to ask a quick question about the community garden. I understand that you made, in your statement, you said it was not relevant to this discussion. The addendum report does address the point, nevertheless, and there's a question about whether we received incorrect legal advice around the other open space before. So, we have discussed it. I'm sure that it will come up again. I'd be interested to know your view as the applicant on this point, whether you believe there is any willingness at your end to reconsider this and to protect or re-provide an equivalent space in the in the proposal?
In the proposal, there is garden space, which is around the area to the southeast corner, which is near to the cafe and event space. So the sort of the social area part is actually all together in one corner. And the garden space is actually larger than the current garden.
Any further questions? Councillor Foster, you look as if you're itching to ask.
Sorry, it's only that the on that point. I mean, the from the objectives' perspective, I suppose that those proposals do not meet the needs of re-providing a community garden space as it is now. So the question is really about whether there would be a reconsideration in the proposal to take those concerns into account. That if your position remains that, no, because we are already providing this space in the form that it is in the current application, then that's the answer to the question, but I just wanted to make that clear.
I think what I can say on that is we are providing a community garden space which will be available to all the community, which includes community outside of the water space as well.
Thank you. Councillor Manuel.
I'd like to ask you what I asked you before. Did you consult the present residents or the present businesses about redoing the garden? What they would like to see in the garden, in other words? They're going to have more space. So what are they going to use that extra space for?
We haven't done any further consultation on the final design or layout of the garden. There is an indicative design in the current planning proposal. The consultations we've done over the last 8 weeks have all been aimed around P31 and P33, which is affordable workspace and relocation strategies. That was what we were requesting to bring back to this.
And just to add as a further point that the plants which are currently in raised beds, we have had discussions about those in terms of trying to keep them and so that they can be perhaps.
I had one last question, which was a concern that was raised by the objectors about the service charges and the fees. And just if you could talk a little bit about what those might be. So
when we were asked the question about additional fees, we believe that it was in the context of the professional fees, because that was the topic which came up within discussions in the consultation sessions. And our position was made clear in that particular session that the fact that the council was no longer going to be trying to seek a contribution towards its own professional fees, as is the usual with any new lease that agrees with the tenant, and that we would waive those. In terms of a service charge, we have been very absolutely consistent in terms of the fact that it will be arising because the nature of the space is one which naturally attracts the requirement for a service charge. And our offer, which stems back as far as November 2023, is the fact that the service charge would be nil for the first 2 years and then kick in the third year, by which time there will be a time to assess the costs and coming up with a fair idea of actually what those are. In that time, of course, then we can find our feet in terms of what's actually necessary and what the tenants would actually be prepared to want and pay for, because service charging is a two-way street. So that is the offer that's been around since 2023.
thank you. So just to clarify, years 1 and 2 service charges were 0, and service charges are likely to come in year 3, but there'll be a consultation exercise with the businesses before that.
The consultation is the normal interaction between managing agent and tenant. That's the kind of consultation that, as opposed to anything particularly formal.
Right. Any further questions from members of the committee? Okay, so thank you very much for coming to present to us. I think you've helped clarify a number of issues for us. Please do remain in the room just in case there's any further questions we need to ask you at a later stage in proceedings. Thank you. Do we have any supporters of the proposal that we're considering today that live within 100 metres of the site? Wish to speak to committee? Seeing anybody? Oh. Great. Could you come forward just very quickly so that we can understand your situation? So do you have, you live at South Dock Marina?
Yes, I'm a resident of South Dock Marina, but you said within 100 yards of the boatyard, which I'm not.
Right.
So
okay.
I have no say over what you've been talking about today. Right. But I did give my support at the previous meeting for the scheme as set out. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I think that's clear, but I think we probably can't hear you. But thank you very much for coming forward. Sorry. It's very similar. It's a few extra meters, isn't it, to get to? I can't quite do the maths in my head. It's about 90 meters. I was about to say it's about 90. I was about to guess, but thank you for that. And are there any ward councillors that'd like to? Would you like to come forward? So I know you have both been to planning committee previously, but I will run through things for you. So I'd like to both introduce yourselves, and I'll give you 3 minutes in which make your contribution to the committee.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Adam Hood.
I'm Councillor Jane Sam.
3 minutes.
Thank you. So I wanted to remind members about the context of this arena. As you can see on the screen, it's a very small space, and the businesses operating there mostly arena. They're there for the repairs, but live in there, and the community is very attached to that. There's a little ecosystem generated there as a result.
Sorry, Adam, could you speak a little closer?
Come closer.
I think a few
there we go.
We'll add a few seconds on.
Thank you very much. And there's a little ecosystem that is generated there between the boatyard and the residents of the arena. And what it means is that we have these kind of micro businesses operate there, very low turnover. There is not space for them to expand those businesses. They're dependent on the marina. There's no other spaces for them in London. And it's why this issue of the rents is so critical to this application right there. There's no, if we increase those rents to a point where those businesses can't afford it, which is what they're saying is going to happen, they can't function there. There's nowhere else also for them to go in London. The nearest comparators are Chatham and Chichester, miles and miles away. The effect of us approving this application, this affordable business plan as it stands, is to effectively expel them from London to go and find somewhere else to go. That's what's going to happen with this application as it currently stands, and I think it is what we need to do is protect them if we want to retain the marina and these businesses in Southwark, which council stated it wants to do in this application, which would mean for those businesses introducing a cap at about £12, as they said, for as long as we can, perhaps a 5 or 10 year period, which would be limited to the businesses currently operating in there. So, which we feel is a kind of negligible in the viability of the scheme, but is a way to kind of protect them, which is probably our key issue.
That was very economical with your time. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councillor Tester.
I didn't know if you had any kind of comments on some of the other issues that have been sort of raised, particularly things like the open space and things like that. I don't know if you have anything to say on that.
Yes, I mean, the open space is a concern, I think, that came up earlier in discussion, where, as Councillor Foster was saying earlier, the council's first line of defence was that it's not open space at all because it's not accessible to the public, and then that has changed behind the scenes. It feels a bit fishy here, and that the council or the applicant has made a decision and then found the rules by which they can do it a bit later on. I would encourage some kind of condition to be put around that enables some kind of contribution to the objectives that allows them to retain some kind of open space that they feel works for them, because it's the location of that marina. There's nothing close to it in the form of open space. The nearest place would be Rushden Woodland, which is quite a ways away for them. They're kind of in the bottom corner of northeast Southwark. And it is a vital thing, as we saw from the photos earlier that they presented, that's important to them, and it's their living space, right? I think that's a thing that's often forgotten about with this application. Is it's not just a boatyard; it's a resource that is there for the people who live in that marina. And what we need to decide on this committee is: do we want them to stay? It's a unique place in Southwark. It's the only one we have. There's nothing comparable to it. In London, as we're finding from the rates discussion. So I think we want to preserve that in some form.
Councillor Manuel.
It's just thought of something. If they're the only specialised people around it, if anything happens, if anybody's boat or they need some, but how far would they have to go to get somewhere? Somebody to
I would encourage you to ask the objectors on the specifics of that. But I know for some of the larger boats that can't be maintained there, they do have to go down to Chatham. That's kind of the order of magnitude I think we'd be at, is if these businesses that are involved in the maintenance of the boatyards cannot survive this and have to leave, you would find much more maintenance that is required by these boats leaving Southwark effectively. Money that's going outside of our local economy to another boatyard, probably outside London.
Any further questions, James? I guess the question that I have, and it's coming back to some of the objectors, is what we're considering today is actually something that's quite specific, because the committee has already made the substantive decision on this application. What we have in front of us today is various matters that we asked to come back to the committee as part of that we wanted to have sight of and for us to have some sort of sign off on before that agreement that we've already agreed signed off as a council in terms of giving that back. Sorry, it's a planning authority. Council is the applicant. But just to repeat that, so that's about the approval of business relocation strategy. That is about the phasing of the affordable, and it's about the issue about on-site storage. So those are the three matters that we have back. I've heard quite powerfully, Councillor Hood, your concern that the fees that are being levied are at a level which could lead some of the businesses there to not be able to continue to wait. But that's obviously an issue about the overall level of fees. It's not specific about phasing of those fees. So just whether on those specifics you had anything further you wanted.
I think with this application and those three areas we're considering, we need to remember that this site is also homes for these people, and that often is forgotten when not just with this application but with any conversation we have about the boatyard, is that it's the part of the council it sits in and is administered in is a kind of commercial arm, whereas this is almost more akin to kind of the council's homes division for what it provides as well, and that's often forgotten in these discussions. You know, when we have these conversations about land value and what the council getting enough bang for its buck about this application, it misses that. You know, if we want to have that conversation about getting as much value as we can out of our land, great, let's level the north of the borough and put a big Tesla factory there. You know, that's not something we would consider doing, right? It's so I would encourage members to remember the ecosystem and the residents of this marina that use and rely on this space, and to consider them particularly in the rent and the storage that they need as part of their housing and their livelihoods, as well as just the redevelopment of this boatyard.
That's very helpful. With that, I'm going to ask you to return to the public seating area.
Thank you.
Councillor Salmon, I think probably, as is usual in these processes, I may have to ask you to leave the room until we reach a decision and then invite you back, as that's the usual process when it's been to committee. I'm advised that's usually the way we do things. I'm not entirely sure what undue influence they think you might have on us by sitting in the room, but it is important that we are seen as having that objectivity in our decision making. Thank you. Yes, yeah, we will. Yeah, please. Yeah, we will let you know when we've reached a decision. So, okay, I think maybe one thing we could do before we carry on, though, is can I ask the applicants to come back just very quickly, because obviously you've heard from the ward councillors about their concerns about the impact on this. Now, and it's something I suspect I will be saying not once but several times in this. You know, obviously as a committee, we are considering the planning aspects of what's in front of us, and we're considering the specifics of the specific items we've got here. So you know, we need to consider and weight anything in all of that. But obviously, given those concerns about the fees that have been raised by the ward councillors, whether you'd like to say to us a bit.
So I think what I'd like to bring to the minds is that this application started as a requirement to improve the health and safety in the boatyard. The health and safety has been challenging for a number of years. There are lots of issues which we are continually trying to pull together to make sure that the yard remains as safe as the scheme that we're putting forward addresses a number of long-term issues which we do need out for council as the landlord. If we don't sort out these issues, there is a danger that we may have to take other actions to address these outstanding items. So far, we've been really lucky that nothing serious has happened. But at some point, something will.
There's not much more to add to the health and safety aspect, which is really one of the key fundamentals for the whole development, as the Harbour Master has said. The ideas about the fact that the marina as a place of lots of residents, and the boatyard in supporting those residences, that there needs to be everything looked at holistically. That yes, there needs to be a boatyard, and there needs to be a boatyard which is effective and operates properly, and can actually be allowed to be invested in to give it a new lease of life. Because it is, as Phil has already mentioned, it is in a state where we are very lucky, and that if we cannot do anything here, then there are going to be some very difficult decisions about its future. So therefore, for it to be able to continue to provide a facility and a place for all the residents of the boatyard who want to have their boats maintained and able to be lived in safely, then there does actually need to be a future boatyard. It cannot come at a deep cost to the council, because with every development, there is this question of viability, and we are at the limit of viability.
I think that's helpful. I think clarification and reminder about why this development's come. Helpful, thank you. Okay, following all of that, are there any further questions for officers that anybody would like to ask at this stage? Councillor Foster.
I want to return a bit to the garden. Basically, I want to clarify with you, Chair, about whether we're considering this or not. Clearly, it's not within the narrow scope of what has been brought back. There's this contention around whether the legal advice was incorrect and therefore it's suitable for the to consider it. I think based on the conversation we had with officers earlier, it does seem clear that the legal advice, it seems that the addendum report kind of concedes the point on the legal advice and produces a fresh argument, which was not previously raised. But I'd like to know what your view is as the chair about whether this is something that we are actually discussing, in terms of like one of the material considerations we're taking into.
As you've asked me, I'll answer that in my view, and then I'll get legal support to put me right on that. So having been at that committee and part of that decision, and certainly the community garden was an issue that we considered at length there. The designation of it as a space of other open space, I don't think was explored. I have to say that the response for me that we got in the addendum, what I thought was actually quite, to me, appeared clear. Because we have a Southwark plan. The Southwark plan identifies those areas of protected open space around the borough, and it specifically shows where they are on a map. It doesn't put it in terms that are kind of showing what the characteristics are. It very clearly says this site, and this site on the map are spaces. As part of the process of coming up that Southwark plan, we then consult on that, and we give the community the ability to feed into that, and obviously as part of that, identify where they think there ought to be other spaces that have that protection. And for me, I think that's the substantive bit, the answer we got here in the addendum today, is that actually that process hasn't happened around this site, and so it isn't designated in the open plan, and it's not really within the powers of committee to arbitrarily decide that something ought to have that designation as part of its consideration of an application. Now, I accept the points that Southwark Law Centre was saying that perhaps what was said previously about that might not have been specific enough, and actually what we've got now is a bit more specific.
Well,
I kind of read that as previous reports saying these might have been some of the things that might have been considered if we were to consider it, whether it ought to have had that designation in the first place, and because they didn't seem that relevant, it was unlikely to have got. But the key thing for me is whether it's in the Southwark plan designated, has that protection set out in the plan. So I'll now turn to the legal officer to see whether he agrees with that as a fair interpretation.
Yes, I do agree with that. I don't have much to add. The only thing is, I suppose, on behalf of officers, didn't want to appear overly defensive or sensitive, but I don't think we're not agreeing or accepting that what we said before was wrong or inaccurate. What's been added, the designation point, is consistent said before, in retrospect, perhaps the designation point should have been included as well, and that's fair. But it's not saying that we got it wrong. It's just adding that further detail to the designation as well.
That seemed reasonable to you, Councillor Foster.
I think it's a reasonable argument. I think that my concern around it is that as a topic that was raised, you know, I mean, we did discuss it last time. It's obviously a big concern for the objectors, and it's been stressed by the businesses and by the Law Centre advocating for them, how important the space is to them, and the fact that the re-provided kind of cafe amenity space doesn't fulfill the same function. I think that there is a material difference for me between a discussion about the nature of the space and how that meets the need for a protected space under the Southwark Plan, and a kind of designation process which may not have occurred for unknown reasons about which we cannot speculate. And that, to my mind, I would want to fulfill the purpose of having such designations around protecting the space where it ought to be protected, and that substantive question about the nature of the space and whether it meets the requirements to be protected according to, you know, why we would want to protect such space, that is the crucial thing, and that it seems like a rather legalistic consideration to say, oh well, you know, it doesn't feature on the map. I mean, obviously an assessment was made, and you mentioned that perhaps it was framed as, oh, you know, if we were to consider it, perhaps it would have been this. I mean, that's not how I read it from the quote from the addendum report, which just simply gives an assessment of the space. It just says, you know, we considered it and it doesn't qualify. And in sort of justifying that point, they mentioned that it has not access to the public, which is something which is, you know, stated in the policy itself, as has been pointed out. So, to my mind, it is a material thing that that is a matter of concern. That take a different view, but that's my view.
No.
Well, just on whether it should be considered or not. Obviously, the scope of what the committee was meant to do is primarily policies P31. I think, frankly, taking a pragmatic view, given the fact that it's discussed, it could be somewhat artificial now at this stage to say, ignore everything. Carbon. My advice would be, as officers have repeated, that the policy is not triggered. So that would be the advice from officers. But I'm not going to say that you can't consider it.
I mean, for me, it clearly is an important issue to consider, but also for me, I think it's a matter that was already considered at the previous committee. And so, maybe that's the critical thing, where it feels a little bit like we're trying to open up discussion that we've already reached a conclusion of when it came to the previous decision. Now, if something had come up today which convinced me that that previous decision was unsafe, then we'd be in a different place. I'm not quite sure how I'd take that forward, because obviously we still have made that decision, and what we need to do if we decide that we made a decision which is now unsafe, and how we unravel that thing, would take a bit of head scratching, work out how we do that. But I don't think I've heard anything today which suggests, and it's not to dismiss the importance of the issue and the importance of the community garden. I've not heard anything today which says that we took a decision that in policy was incorrect, albeit I understand the issue that Southwark Law Centre are making in that I don't know whether misunderstood what the designation point is, or whether they felt it hadn't been given significant enough weight previously. But it appears clear to me that this isn't designated as an open space. in any policy, and therefore we can't use that as a way of revisiting the decision that we took previously on this matter. So I kind of think that's where we are. So I hate to repeat the words of my predecessor as chair, but what we always need to consider in planning application is the application is the application is the application. And in this case, the main application has already been determined. What we are considering are a number of concerns that we raised at that committee that we wanted to see more detail on, which were very specific. They were about, we didn't think the business relocation package that we saw before was clear enough. We felt that there was insufficient phasing of increasing rents, and we wanted some more answers about storage. So for me, those for me are the issues that we need to make a decision on. Councillor Tester.
I suppose making a kind of a comment and being more of an observation, but building on that previous sort of point, looking at the kind of policy maps for the other open space, it doesn't include some things around where I live, where you've got like sort of, kind of pool parks and sort of like green spaces within estates and things like that. So looking at the wording of the policy itself, it sort of says that other open spaces are ones which are not metropolitan open land or borough open land, but meet one or more of the following criteria. So that could be like allotments, playing fields, public open space, including parks and gardens, private open spaces which have benefit to the local community, an open space that has been created and secured through planning obligations, and then sites of ecological importance. And again, I was also not at the previous committee, so it could be that I'm sort of repeating an argument that's already been made, but it does at least seem to me that, except that that's not the application that we're looking at now, but if we were looking at an application on one of those bits that is not designated as other open space in the plan, but could be seen as being so, we would probably be throwing it out on that sort of same argument. So I agree with the points that you've made, Chair, but I think perhaps I agree with the points that Councillor Foster is making, that actually this does seem to be a just fundamental level of inclarity within the planning policy that is adopted already. So again, it was more of a kind of observation than anything else, but it does seem to me as though that's something that should be looked at least in the kind of new local plan process. Thank you.
I think that's very helpful. We'll make note of that. So yeah, I think what's very clear from all the discussion is you're right. We probably need to clarify the wording around all of that so it is clear. So we'll take that forward and note of that. So he will be making sure that gets fed into future processes. So returning to the specifics of the application, one thing that that for me has stuck out as a concern, which has some relevance to the issue about fees. However, I also know that isn't actually part of the specifics about what we asked to come back. I'm not entirely sure that planning committee is the place that we be having discussion about fees, given I think clearly there is an economic test there in terms of and indeed some political judgment, I think, in terms of what the right levels of fees ought to be for the boatyard. So I think that is an important discussion for the council, but I don't think it's a matter for this planning committee. And certainly what I would say and would certainly want recognised is, I know both the marina and the boatyard, and I know how important the marina actually is. It's a real jewel in the crown of Southwark, and I think losing that ecology of the local community there, and how wonderful it is actually as space and the community that we've got there, and knowing the importance of the boatyard, to me those are things that we all ought to value a great deal. And so I do think it's important that the council is finding a way to work with the berth holders to make sure that there is a viable future there for berth holders and as many of the businesses there as possible, albeit, as I think was powerfully said by the officers, it has to be within a financial envelope which is feasible and is not putting strange on what we already know is a very strained financial environment for the council. feels to me as if what I probably ought to be doing outside the meeting, if we were to agree these applications, is perhaps raising that matter with the cabinet member for leisure to make sure she's considering that when she's looking at the fees. Albeit, we have got this situation where we have got phasing, so it's thinking about how we're getting there further along. But I think that's probably better taken outside of planning committee. Given that, I don't know if anybody has any further comments on the proposals itself at this stage. If not, I'd like to move that we adopt the officer's recommendations as set out in paragraph 1 of the report on page 11 of the main agenda pack, namely to note and advise members of further information received in respect to the foreign items of the main agenda. The planning permission be granted subject to conditions and the applicant entering into the appropriate legal agreement in the event that the requirements of paragraph 2 are not met by the 6th of August 2025 Director of Planning Growth be authorised to refuse planning permission if appropriate the reasons set out paragraph 51, I think it is. But just to, is that seconded by any member? Thank you, Councillor Manuel. I'm going to ask people in turn how they wish to vote on this matter. As you seconded it, Councillor Manuel, how would you like to vote on this matter? Councillor Foster.
No.
Councillor Parton. Yes, that's fine. I understood what that meant. No, right, that's fine.
Sorry, it was established.
Councillor Parton.
4.
Councillor Tester. Councillor Richard Livingstone. I'm also. So the motion carried. I'm going to allow people a quick 5-minute break because we've been going on for a while and it has taken point 2 on our agenda, which is Dulwich Sports Club at Giant Archers Road, London, SE 24 9HP. And I'd like officers to first of all present their report on this. So is it, Andre, you're presenting, is that right? So just if you bear with us a second and we will get the presentation on my technical issue. Okay, are we close to ready? Almost. Right. Again, apologies. I know you've had a long wait until this meeting, but we will start very soon, I promise.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to Dulwich Sports Club. Proposal is for the construction of outdoor playing facilities. Proposed is 2 paddle courts. Wrong with the slide in the 5 paddle courts. I'm just
That's panicked a lot of people for a moment.
I'm not sure if this is 5, but let's see what the next slide brings up. 5 paddle courts. So this is just an explanation of visual explanation of how a paddle court cross sides and 2 doors on the side. So it's
Andre, can I ask you to speak a little closer to the microphone? So apologies. Yeah, the microphone.
Apologies.
Not
sure. So this is the site. Dulwich Sports Club gives you an idea. It's half of the Metropolitan Open Land, which is shared by another club. And the slide on the left shows Metropolitan Open Land, and the right you can see that it is flanked by a site of importance, nature conservation, which is adjacent to the railway line. This is just to give you a perspective of where controlled parking zones are in proximity to the site. So there's Stradella Road on the other side of the railway line is a controlled parking zone. There are existing trees and hedges on the site, of which a total of 42 trees. So you can see the categories there. You've got B, C, and U. I just note that category B, C, and U are all described as moderate quality, but category B tree has higher rating than C, and category U is the lowest value. There are 39 existing car parking spaces on the site. See them next to the tennis court. And there are a couple of spaces along Giant Arches Road, which are top of it. There are also existing cycle parking spaces on the site. So the existing number of cycle spaces is 46, and they are in two locations close to the main clubhouse and here on the slide on the picture right at the bottom between the two tennis courts adjacent to the grass tennis courts, cycle park. Moving on to the proposed pavilion. This is the slide showing the internal layout and the dimensions of the pavilion is stipulated in the officer report, but it's of a modest size to accommodate mainly and facilitate croquet court space, but it could be used by tennis players and coaches and participants in tennis as well. This is a side elevation of the proposed pavilion from the north, and just want to talk about a bit more detail in what is proposed. So at the moment, there's no paddle courts, but 5 new floodlit paddle courts are proposed. At the moment, there's 3 croquet courts, and there will be 2 full-size croquet courts, but third croquet court would be a practice court. South corner of there's 11 tennis courts at the moment, but they will be reduced to 10. But there would be a change in reduction from 4 grass tennis courts to 2, and the number of hard court floodlights tennis courts would increase from 5 to 8. You can see on the bottom of this slide that there's the existing 5 floodlit tennis courts are indicated in the yellowish color, and you can see there's 5, but it's increasing to a total of 8 courts, and you can see the 5 paddle courts. Now, so those are the. Did you get there? That's the location for paddle court. This is just a visual to make it easier to understand the change in hours proposed. So at the moment, there's 3 tennis courts which are historically used or let's rather say between 8 o'clock in the morning and 10 o'clock at night, and they aren't part of this application. The historic use, and the new courts, the new tennis courts will also be at the same hours, 8 o'clock until 10 o'clock in the evening, and the croquet courts were never lit, and they aren't proposed to be lit either, but the 5 paddle courts will be lit, and the applicant is proposing the same hours, 8 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock at night. You can see the last column in the table stipulates Saturday, Sundays, and bank holidays. So it will be at 8:30 finishing time. Courts 6 and 7 are existing tennis courts, and the applicant is proposing to extend the playing hours, finishing hours for half an hour from 9 o'clock Monday to Saturday till 9:30 in the. This is an illustration of the proposed floodlights to the paddle courts. You can see they just under 7 meters height, which is my understanding the general height for this type of floodlights. There's an area in the slide where it should actually read 3 paddle ports. So there's 5 paddle ports, and this is 3 of the 5 ports will have 6-meter fencing, but those would be to the furthest away from the existing clubhouse. And this is the impact of the proposal on hedges to be removed, so that no trees would be affected, and the low value C hedges would be removed. There's 4 hedges to be removed. There are no tree protection orders on the site, and where works are proposed within root protection areas, those would be covered by a method statement. That is a cycle parking. The cycle parking would increase from 46 to 61 spaces, and that would comply with policy, and there would also be larger spaces for cargo cycles, accessible cycles, etc., and those would be in proximity to the clubhouse. This is just a brief summary, as in the officer report, of all the issues raised by objections, labor objections, and those are dealt with point by point in the officer report. The principle of development on metropolitan open land is also discussed in detail in the officer report, and in this case, meets policy. There were concerns raised from objectors regarding the design and size and height of the pavilion, but conclusion is that it is consistent with policy and would not be detrimental to the character of the village conservation area, and any or details of the materials would be conditioned to ensure a high quality finish. This is just to reiterate the point about protection of existing trees, and primarily the trees that would be impacted would be trees where the path from the clubhouse to the new pavilion would be widened and improved to a permeable surface, and that would also improve access for all users to the site, for example, wheelchair users, etc. There are several benefits to the site, but biodiversity net gain is going to increase well above the 10% policy requirement at 18.48%. And in the left-hand corner, we see I circled trees which are in blue, and then the light green is additional planting, which was recommended and required by our ecological officer, and that's to enhance the proximity and protect the open space, the area of scientific importance. But yes, overall, a very good biodiversity net gain that would be secured by the Section 106 for monitoring, and a fee will be paid in the Section 106. That is the proposed path. You can see there's it's the entire distance from the pavilion to the main clubhouse that would be improved. Turning to amenities, so there were objections raised by local residents regarding noise, issues regarding glare from the floodlights as well, linked with the proposed hours, which would go beyond 9 o'clock in the evening, which is was pointed out by objectors is, in their opinion, and there's reference to current approvals within Dulwich, which is a lot of them is around 9 o'clock. The applicant is proposing 10 o'clock. We have the environmental protection officer here that can answer any questions regarding noise and hours as such. The applicant did submit a document yesterday or today pointing out that they found examples around London, southeast London, where several other facilities have floodlights until 10 o'clock. There's a few until 10:30 at night. Now, I know every application is assessed on its own merits, but in this case, we came to the conclusion that the noise report points that 10 o'clock is an acceptable time. I would stress that noise monitoring would be subject to a condition, which would, in our opinion, address concerns for future from residents to ensure that if there's any issues raised, that would be addressed or picked up or mitigated by the condition. The slide just shows the distances from, for example, Stradella Road to the back of the property from the new paddle courts, which at the moment is a croquet court, is over 70 meters. And there's a railway line viaduct between the site and Stradella Road properties. Objectors did point out that it is not a solid structure, so there is some noise going through the viaduct. Noise report again is the document that officers used and assessed the application against, and that is found to be satisfactory with the subject to the condition. You can see the distance between the new paddle courts and the rear of gardens is over 30 meters. On this slide, you can see tennis courts. Those are the existing tennis courts. You can see the existing tennis courts, which at the moment have a floodlight until 10 o'clock, is closer to the rear gardens of Stradella Road. This is just an image which is in the officer report to show you the location of the floodlights. Objectors did raise, you can see the white dots of the proposed floodlights on the 3 new tennis courts, and then you have your 5 new paddle courts in that corner. This is an image showing, taken from the noise assessment, showing the noise levels. You can see in the table there is the different noise levels, and majority, you can see those are the rear gardens. So that was taken into account from the proposed development itself. This is a slide which relates to 2 issues, but in terms of noise, the applicant is proposing to have a booking system in place where to mitigate noise, you would have 5 courts. If they are booked, they might all be booked, in certain times, but if they aren't fully booked, the booking system would book them in order of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as shown on the slide. 1 and 2 being closest to the clubhouse and the furthest courts closer to the neighbouring properties. Sorry, let me go back to that slide as well, because this also relates or addresses issues around bats. There were issues raised from neighbours regarding the impact on commuting and foraging of bats. The ecologist looked at proposal and found that there wouldn't be a negative impact on bats, but as mitigation, and it will help any impact from light spill. This would also deal with bats. But the bats, any issues regarding impact on bats would be addressed by an appropriate condition around quality of the lights and so on. The next slide or next part of the scheme relates to transport. So we have our transport officer here to answer any specific questions. But officers found that the impact on transport would be addressed, or there's no detrimental impact in terms of any major concerns. We've looked at transport in detail, and the travel plan is key to ensure that any future impacts would be reduced effectively. A travel plan encourages alternative means of transport, less car journeys. So what we've looked at, and the applicant agreed to having e-bike, e-scooter parking on site, and produce this plan, which I think it's referred to in the addendum. Within the council, we have an officer that coordinates locations for e-parking across any provider, and the preference is to have this on the site, not on Burbage Road or any road. That might be possible, but the preference is to have it on site with the agreement from the applicant. I believe the applicant is willing to agree to such a parking space. One of the main concerns raised by objectors, especially from Burbage Road, was the impact on traffic on Burbage Road. And this is the latest table or latest results from a recent survey done on between the 15th of May until the 21st of May. I believe the member or the officer report isn't very clear. I've tried to make this as big as I can, but I just highlighted, for example, the busier between 5 and 6 is just over 3,000. What you use the term hourly hits, so we can perhaps explain it a bit more if members wish by asking the transport officer exactly, how the 3,000 figure works. But you can see that as a percentage, there's a 4%, the development will have a 4% impact on additional traffic on Burbage Road. And the slide shows the average for the hourly periods. And you'll note that there's a few zeros in there. In the middle line, predicted additional journeys. For example, where there's 3,094, there's an additional predicted 77 trips generated by, or hourly hits generated by the development, which equates to 2.5%. Later in the evening, between 8 and 9, that increases to 7.7. But on average, it's a 4% increase. Mitigation regarding safety concerns at the junction of Giant Arches Road and Burbage Road is included within the Section 106, the legal agreement, where an additional speed hump is proposed. There's already a speed hump on Giant Arches Road, which is a private road, but the applicant engaged with the owner of the road, and there's an agreement to have the additional speed hump. So that would be secured by the legal agreement. There were also concerns raised by local residents regarding cycle safety. You can see 3,000 hits on the traffic survey or count is a high number. This Burbage Road is part of the cycle grid network of the council, but that is part of a wider issue addressed by other departments in the council. So cycle safety, we looked at it, but in the 4% context of increase in traffic, officers came to the conclusion that that is not something that needs to be addressed by this application. There was also issues raised around pedestrian safety within the site, given that there would be there are drop-offs, people are dropped off and picked up, and that the applicant just produced this plan to show that there is adequate space on the site for cars to enter and exit in forward gear, effectively, turning around close to the clubhouse. One of the concerns raised by objectors was that there is around flood risk, and the applicant submitted a flood risk assessment, and this is a summary of the drainage strategy. Effectively shows that there would be improved permeability on the site, just under 300 square meters. So these, although there would be some loss of lawn, on balance, the flood risk would reduce by having improved drainage on the site. This is just a summary of the planning obligations. As I referred, biodiversity net gain would be secured by monitoring over 30 years. Highway works, I referred to the new speed hump, and there would be any on-street parking permits in the future would not be available for businesses on the site. The last issue I'm just touching on is community impact and equalities assessment. So officers looked at age and access as one of the main issues identified, specifically that there are a number of elderly croquet players, and the fact that the croquet pitches are moving further away from the car parking and from the existing clubhouse. Officers are recommending approval subject to the construction environment management plan, which includes a clause that phasing of development would take into account that there's always, or ensure that there's always, one croquet court which would be playable during construction, and there's a condition relating to providing a buggy for transport between, if needed, between the site and the new pavilion. And that is my conclusion. We recommend that planning permission is granted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That's a very comprehensive report. Any questions from committee members? Councillor Emanuel.
Table aspect of it. Have they got facilities downstairs anyway that they can use? I remember the last time I went in it. Upstairs, I don't remember the disabled one. There might be, but
in terms of the facilities, the new clubhouse will be accessible and would be at only one story. So the existing clubhouse, as far as I know, would not change in terms of access. But I do believe, and maybe the applicant clarify, free. Thanks, Dennis. Yes. So you can see there's an accessible WC, and the the layout would be accessible. And just to point out again, the new access path would be widened and improved and be a better quality.
Councillor Parton.
Thank you. I'm just looking on the slide around the proposed floodlight height, and I'd just be keen for any further details on the proposed luminosity of the lights.
I should know that answer, but maybe I can refer that to Paul. Do you know?
At the moment, the design of the lighting is not known to me, but there is a condition that could be placed on the decision note to say that a suitable plan will be made and for the lighting to be within the Institute of Lighting Engineer guidance for village. We would look at the design of them so that there's minimal spillage outside the courts, and also there's the guidance for bats and biodiversity.
Just to add, condition 7 requires the submission of a lighting design strategy to be approved. That refers to biodiversity, but that could add in reference to the Institute of Lighting.
Councillor Tester.
Thank you for your presentation. That was really detailed. I was just wondering if you could touch on the suitability of such development on metropolitan open land and how that sort of sits, at least in the office's view, with our planning policy, because I note that is the kind of topic of a lot of the objectors' concerns. So yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Page 19 of the officer report addresses all the relevant policies. And the conclusion, so I'll just talk about the main issues that needs to be looked at. The policies talks about inappropriate development, and then there's various criteria which that when we look at situations of nature. So the key is that if I'm looking at the NPPF, paragraph 154, point B, talks about provision of appropriate facilities, and then why this is appropriate is outdoor sport. That's one of the criteria. Then there's also the London plan, and then we have our Southwark plan. And objectors referred to the Dulwich supplementary planning document as well. So all those documents were taken into account. But the crux is that outdoor sports proposed, and then of course for the sports for the pavilion, it is ancillary and facilitates the use of outdoor sport. So you know there's shelter when it's adverse weather. There's well, not adverse, it's both, you know, hot weather as well. And there's comfort, especially the fact that at the moment, there's also not any WCs close to that part of the site. But just to specifically talk about those policies, so the crux is that it is connected with an existing outdoor sport, and it's just it meets the policy. And then we also looked at the openness. Openness of MOL is one of the concerns. So in context of the site, the size of the site, it's a very small proportion of openness, but it meets all the criteria in terms of facilitating outdoor sport. So, for example, used in connection with the existing use of the land for outdoor sport. And then again, same applies in terms of the lighting columns, the enclosures for paddle courts, the higher cricket nets that's proposed as well. So it complies with all those policies.
That's a tester.
Just as a sort of a follow up on that point, and this, feel free to kind of correct me or say that I'm wrong in any way, shape, or form. But would you sort of, in your judgment, say that those kind of principles of openness and that kind of community and sporting use still applies if it's a private members? I believe that it's a membership-based system. It's not a kind of public facility in that sort of sense, and providing kind of like open sort of space for recreation is on a membership basis. But I could appreciate that may not have any basis in kind of planning policy.
The policy in the MPPF and the Southwark Plan refers to outdoor sport, recreation, and facilities ancillary to that. It doesn't distinguish members clubs.
Can I ask a question about transport? Not least because I know that Alec has been waiting quite a long time. But I noticed we've obviously one of the controversial aspects of this is about the extension of the hours where it's floodlit usage, and obviously I think the concern of some residents is that means that the operation of this will be more substantive at a slightly later time in the evening, up to about 10 o'clock. And that the transport flow graph, if I understood it correctly, doesn't suggest there's a particularly big increase in the level of traffic despite those increased hours and times of usage. So just to understand that a little, able to.
Thank you. So the majority of increase of trips will be from paddle cart by paddle cart. From the floodlit cart, from the trip generation, from the existing, they're expecting others 18 to the site, but that will only happen during the winter months, in the darker evenings. It won't be throughout the whole year, and it will be off the peak of the existing network. Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful, I think. Yes. Yeah. Any further questions from members? I don't see anybody at the moment. So what I'm going to do is to ask whether there are any objectors in the audience that would like to come forward. So please come forward to the tables in front. So just to run you through things, I'm going to allow you each to very briefly introduce yourselves. One thing that I always need to state in these, you tell us what road you live so we've got an idea, but please don't disclose any information in this meeting that you wouldn't be in the public domain about nice addresses, because this is live streamed, and so people knowing where you live, that's not convenient to you. So after you've done that, I'll then give you 3 minutes in which Yes, yes, please, yes. Yes, so if you press the button, then it will turn red to speak. So yeah, if you just both introduce yourselves and then I'll.
I'm here representing the affected residents of Speller Road, Dulwich Sports Club's nearest neighbours, the new tennis and paddle court. We believe the officers got it wrong in the following ways. In the report, point 315, it says that the current planning permission allows the tennis courts up to 10 p.m. New court should have the same timing. We dispute that. Indeed, the only planning approval given by this council is for courts 6 and 7 and states a 9 o'clock cut-off, which is the same as the other playing field, which shares the space lanes. Again, a 9 o'clock cut-off. This was granted in 2018 after Dulwich Sports Club consulted neighbours and was reported in the design statement, and I quote, once it was agreed that the lights would not be used after 9 p.m. in line with the other sports facilities, there were no further objections. Well, there are objections to 10 o'clock, not 9 o'clock, but all the other playing ones around there, including the velodrome, are 9 o'clock. The floodlight courts which are being used to justify the 10 o'clock cut-off are currently under planning enforcement notice, as there is no record of planning permission ever having been granted, and it didn't influence it in 2018 planning permission with the timings of a 9 o'clock cut-off. To allow floodlights until 10 not only goes against what was agreed with the residents in 2018, is objected to by the Dulwich Society, and I know they've written in, it's inconsistent with planning permissions that they and Edward Lanes Club, who share the site, have sought and been granted with a 9 p.m. cut-off. We also note that the Lanes position next to DCS has been omitted from the planning officer's assessment of similar clubs. They share the same field, but it wasn't mentioned as having a 9 o'clock cut-off. Further, the officer suggests that the giant arches, railway viaduct, act as mitigation on noise and light. In fact, the huge arches, which are wider than our houses, taller than the lighting poles, afford limited barrier to light and sound, and in some circumstances can amplify that, as you can see from a neighbour's photo of what it looks like from their back garden when the lights are on. Have a look at that. And that actually was taken at 11 o'clock in the evening. In summary, while we support the club's ambitions, we're not against it in principle. They've been less than forthcoming regarding the timings, and we feel strongly that the timing of use of floodlights is limited to 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., 8:30 on Sundays, in keeping the current approvals as agreed with residents and the council in 2018. We also feel strongly that no play should be allowed before 8 a.m., be that with or without lights, as we learned in the last few days and confirmed by the club secretary who's here that they intend to be bookable from 7 a.m. 7 days a week, which we believe is just too much and is very disruptive.
Thank you. That's precisely 3 minutes. Thank you. I've got a number of people that wish to ask a question. I wonder what it's going to be. Councillor Savage.
Is there anything else you'd like to add? Thank you.
There is something I'd like to add. Thank you. My name is John English. I'm speaking on behalf of 8 properties on Turney Road, which abut the southern boundary of the site. We are objecting to the new pavilion in the southeast corner of the site, and my objections tonight are restricted to that. I direct members to the drawing of the side elevation of the pavilion on page 26 of the officer's report. So this does not show the fixed tables and seating beneath the larger roof overhang. The proposed pavilion is located only 23 metres from our properties. We object to it for the following reasons. At 4.229 metres, the roof is unnecessarily high for a single-storey building, as tall as a double-decker bus. With the new covered and lit fixed tables and seating, Club could not have designed a better hub to attract and increase the already high level of antisocial behaviour on the site. Club's proposal, which is not an obligation, for a 24-hour remote monitoring, not help us while waiting for a security guard at 2 a.m. And while new security lighting and an alarm is likely to make matters even worse. The club have confirmed that the pavilion will only be used during daylight. No after dark club gatherings will be permitted there. However, there is no condition to that effect in the draft planning consent, so this is not binding. So in conclusion, we have no objection to a pavilion on the site, so long as it is expressly restricted to use during daylight hours and has a low-level roof, no extended roof overhang, no fixed outside tables and seating, no alarm and security lighting. This will still provide a pavilion that meets all the requirements of the club.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Chair. Just on the last point you're making about the pavilion, what's the nature of the antisocial behaviour that occurs on the, or that you're worried will occur on outdoor seating?
Open to it. We had particular nights like tonight, actually, Barney, and towards a breaking night. It's where kids gather, drink, stay out till 8 hours, often early hours in the morning. And on occasion, there has been some aggressive acts towards us, saying, just might like to go home now, or had a few. The election is as copy as it might. So the club acknowledged that this is an issue, that it is antisocial. Earlier draft it was suggested that we, neighbours overlooking this, and manage that aspect. Actually, ridiculous. It shouldn't be facing it. It is a fact that is that's not going to change. But particularly that elevation there, the side elevation, where you see the large overhang, there'll be fixed seating and a table. The other end, there is fixed seating. It's going to be a perfect hub for what is already the access, congregated in an area which is 3 metres from my property and my neighbours around me. And what the antisocial behaviour that we experience now will be congregated in that once, almost inevitably.
Councillor Manuel.
Yeah, I have a problem understanding the antisocial behavior. Do they just sit there and drink and laugh and joke? Or do they fight and do all sorts of things there?
They sit there and laugh and drink. They don't fight. But at 2 o'clock in the morning, in what is a family street, it gets pretty tiresome, I have to say. And on the few occasions, and it's not frequent, but when few occasions that we've gone out, my wife in particular one time was confronted by a large group of 15 or 20, mainly males, who told her in no uncertain terms where to go. So it's kids being kids. It's the way it is. We're back onto a lovely big sports club. We're very happy with that. One of the prices we pay, what we're saying is that this pavilion will be a greater hub for them not only to come to the site, but to congregate to a particular point on the site, which is very close to our property.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Maybe this is getting too outside the scope here, but presumably if there were more places to sit and gather in the area, that would help with the issue. I don't know if that's something to amend or if that's really more park management.
So I'm not quite sure what the question is in terms of adding a condition saying provide more seating elsewhere. Or
Well, there is this question. I mean, I don't think before you described as a crime, but they're designing that out as an aspect that gets considered. And
I think it's relevant, and I think you have to consider the communication responses that have been received from environmental health and all police who are consulted, and I suppose to consider, as always with planning application, what will the impact of the development.
May I comment on that?
Yes, please do.
One of the reasons this is an attractive site is it's private, it's open but private, so it's away from, if you like, parents' eye. So for that reason, it's an attractive place to come. Look at that side elevation. If you literally just took off the end, each side, you would remove it as being a hub for antisocial. The antisocial behaviour will continue. It's just a product of what the site is. What we're trying to avoid is an area which is right outside our houses, where they will inevitably come in whatever weather, because they are then protected from the elements as well. So the pavilion as it is a hub. The pavilion without those two end parts is not a hub.
Yeah, okay, I think very helpful. Any further questions for I'm going to turn to Councillor Manuel and Councillor Foster.
Are you saying that if it doesn't have a roof, it's okay, and if it has a roof, it's not okay?
If it doesn't have the extended roof, beneath which is fixed seating and a table, that removes an element of where people will gather. And at this further in, there's also covered seating. So it's the covered seating and the fixed nature of the seating which will mean it's an attractive place for the existing antisocial behaviour to be centred in a spot which is 23 metres from.
Councillor Foster.
Thanks. The other objection, I didn't catch your name, Stephen. In your a part of the report which I did not find in time, I was wondering if you could just draw our attention again and maybe repeat what you said.
I believe it's 0.315.
Can anyone provide guidance on where to find it?
Okay. Which is what they used to justify will actually be 10 o'clock. And that's not correct. The only proved.
So perhaps when we return to officers.
That's helpful.
Just boss.
Councillor Tester.
Thank you. And specifically on this point about paragraph 315, I don't know to what extent, and perhaps some legal advice might be useful, that we're able to consider that image that was shared with us. But from that image, that's at 11 p.m, which is even further beyond the 10 p.m. timing that you're saying is in our report, and also the 9 p.m. that you say is the actual one that they are meant to be operating till. So how often are things lit up beyond that 9 p.m, 11 p.m. kind of time?
I should make it clear that the courts 1, 2, and 3, which are the ones that don't have planning permission, those ones are used at the moment until 10. In fact, the photo I sent around is used until 11. That's under a planning enforcement notice at the moment. The only planning that has been permitted and gone through this process has both with Court 6 and 7 for the Dudley Sports Club and with the lanes, older lanes, Everett Lanes Sports Club. They've come to it's 9 o'clock.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any further questions from members of the committee. So I'd like to thank you both for coming forward. You've given us some really important points to follow up later in. Please return to the public meeting area. So I would now like to ask the applicants or the applicants. Yeah, sorry, was that not it? Sorry, apologies. I know it's got quite late, so apologies for that. Yes, so what I'm going to do, as before, is I'll ask you each to introduce yourselves in turn, and then once you've done that, you'll have 3 minutes to present to the committee, and then we will listen to members of the committee.
Thank you. So I'm Caroline Vieira. I'm the president of Dulwich Sports Club.
I'm Susie Giles, secretary.
Hi, I'm Mark Marshall, I'm the architect and agent for the scheme.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Dulwich Sports Club is a community amateur sports club, therefore not for profit and run by volunteers. The club has been a valuable multi-sport amenity for the community for about 150 years. We pride ourselves on being affordable, friendly and inclusive, but must also be modestly commercial to survive. We're constantly battling rising costs, and we do need to change to thrive, to stay competitive and relevant for current and future generations. The plan you see today was developed after a design and consultation process of over 3 years, which included all of our sports sections and many local residents. The project is designed to stabilise our financial position, to allow us to invest in our ageing infrastructure, to improve accessibility throughout the site, and to enable steps towards net zero targets in due course. Positive sustainability is key. We will increase access to sport locally by introducing the growing sport of paddle, which provides fun and activities for all ages and abilities, both competitive and social. Whereas several local clubs have closed their croquet lawns, we have actively chosen to retain our croquet club and to construct new and improved accessible lawns and facilities. And as a croquet member myself, I believe this is a good outcome. The scheme will enable the club to expand local access to sport, both with memberships and with outreach programmes to schools and other local groups. The proposed paddle courts are intentionally located and screened behind an embankment with 2 active railway lines, with the clubhouse on a third side, and are a considerable distance from the nearest properties. We have demonstrated that this location results in very little noise impact, but we are happy to create a noise management plan and to work with our neighbours to make mitigations if issues arise. The same applies to the new tennis courts, and our floodlighting request simply matches the floodlight timings we have had on adjacent tennis courts for the last 60 years. We will be providing much improved accessibility to the whole site, and the new planting scheme offers an increase in biodiversity well above the minimum required. We have researched increasing our security as our development proceeds. Most of our members live within a mile or 2 of the club, and a large proportion already arrive by bike or on foot, and the club welcomes an ongoing travel plan as we positively promote active travel. We have done our utmost with professional reports and consultations to design the right solutions for the community and for our members. We have worked closely with our planning officer to meet all necessary requirements and to make the implementation fair to all. We are very much looking forward to implementing the plan.
Thank you. I was about to cut you short, but it seems you got there just in time, so well done. Questions to the applicant? Councillor Salmon.
Thank you, Chair. So many questions, so many. But my colleagues will ask a lot as well. With the paddle, is it just called paddle? I want to say paddle game, paddle ball.
In the same way that tennis is tennis,
Okay,
paddle is
paddle.
paddle.
How long will they book a court for? Or a space for?
I understand 90 minutes is pretty well a thing, and sometimes an hour.
And as you get towards the end of the day, how will they know to stop? Because we know everybody gets very involved in their games of tennis or paddle or whatever.
Within the booking system that already exists for tennis and will be implemented in a similar way for paddle, there literally is a booking system that allows you to say, we're booking this length of time, we're booking this length of time. Outside of the hours that you are supposed to be allowed to book, you shouldn't be able to book. So if 10 o'clock is the cut-off time, then 10 o'clock is the cut-off time.
So we saw some pictures of floodlights that seem to be going on forever.
Yeah.
Will you have automated floodlights that will just switch off, or it'll say, here's a warning, they will turn off in 10 minutes? So
yes. Actually, the fact that those particular photographs were taken, I think took all of us by surprise, because the cut-off time on the lights at the moment should be 10 o'clock with an extra 10 minutes to allow people to get off the tennis courts. There is an override which can be used in an emergency. And frankly, we really didn't understand why it was being used on that particular occasion.
So an event might have happened, somebody might have been hurt, and
something of that nature. We haven't seen the picture.
To be fair, we weren't given a date for that, so we don't know whether that was 5 years ago or the booking system's recent.
Oh, yeah, it says the 8th of January, 2025.
It's January.
So that shouldn't have been the case. Yeah. The system should have cut off.
And in actual fact, we've had discussions already to, in effect, even the override system should really not be usable after about 10:10, because otherwise, what's the point of it?
Yes, I completely agree with that. Can I also comment that my mother was a croquet player. After being a tennis player, became a croquet player, which seems like a natural progression. She became a monster when she was playing croquet. A monster. I've never seen anything like it. I just want to say, don't be thinking these people are, they might pretend they're not very capable of things, and then they get out there and they whack them. Oh, anyway,
absolutely.
That was
quite so.
Was absolutely, yes, I can see. I love the idea that you've got to practice croquet. I don't think they need practice. They practice on each other. Anyway, I'm telling you, you've never seen anything like it. And don't like them until late at night. You'll all go horribly wrong. The other thing I was going to ask, very quick one. Yes. The pavilion, it was commented that if you have that seating outside, it will become a hub for young people. Is it possible you could do that pavilion and have chairs and tables that are brought out from within the pavilion, so during the day, as opposed to having fixed seating outside? Is that going to be possible?
Mark to answer that.
I don't see why not. What was drawn on the application was sort of picnic tables, classic picnic tables, partly because we have some on the site, and the overhang is there in order to shade from the weather we've been having today. We've got croquet players in the 70s and 80s. Yes, they could sit inside, but to have shelter outside is on the north end of the building for that same reason.
So it could be considered that you could have tables and chairs that could be brought out during the appropriate time.
I don't see any reason against that. Equally, the fixed bench at the southern end was intended as going to be slanting at that end. It was intended as a nice spot to sit in the sun on a cooler but sunny day. We can see why the objectors bringing those issues. So we could remove that, and likewise it could be seats that are brought out.
The pavilion won't be lit itself. It will still be at night. It will be in
after dusk. Yes,
itself. There isn't seating.
There's a pathway around that area at the moment, because there's an entrance, a footpath entrance onto Turney Road, so you can arrive by Turney Road on foot. So to link that with the main pavilion, there's an AstroTurf footpath which is lit, low-level bollards that then cut off at 10 o'clock if you're going to leave the courts. The new path, which as Andre mentioned, will be better for wheelchairs, is still lit in exactly the same way.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Chair. Just on the picnic benches, I guess it would be something of a loss of that provision for the users of the club and for the members. So I'm wondering if you understand from current users of the area if they value that, or do you think that it's not actually wouldn't be a very big deal to lose the picnic benches and have chairs that are brought out from inside?
The picnic benches I referred to are in that area anyway.
That's what I mean.
As in now, there's already seating there. I suppose the objective's point is that it will be covered, and therefore could be, it's a more attractive place to be in the rain. But there are seats there for people to sit on at the moment, so it's not that different from its condition, I would say.
No, I appreciate that. I suppose my question is around how valued that provision is if the application were to be changed to remove it, whether that is something that would be a detriment at all, or basically it is or not. That's the only.
So as you can see it from 2 points of view, one is that if you've got to bring seating out, if someone's actively got to do that, as in if they say folding chairs inside, got to be opened up and brought out, which is not too much of a problem. One of the reasons to have the pavilion there is sort of shelter both of elderly players, but also that those courts, the adjacent tennis courts, are often used for children's tennis. So having a loo there is really useful. At the minute we have a Portaloo there in peak season. So I suppose it would be more easy for anybody, whether elderly or young, to sit down quickly were the chairs already to be there. And given that they are in that area anyway, I mean, it's difficult to condition as not having a bench on that site to sit on. And essentially, we're just talking about putting benches underneath the cover.
I wanted to turn back to the issue of, obviously, that is a different point of contention here about the hours. We seem to hear two slightly different stories. There was one that nothing nearby has got permission to be on past 9 o'clock, and you're telling us that you've had lights on till 10 o'clock for the last 60 years. So, if you just explain that, because to me that confused me. There seems to be such disparity between these two stories.
So when objectors raise the issue of it not having planning permission, that's simply because Southwark don't have it in their planning portal. And the club, through 60 years of accounts and etc., doesn't have the document. But those courts have been used as floodlit courts since 1962. There's a long membership that all have played there through generations, hundreds of members. I myself have played there since 2014, and those courts have always been floodlit. And I think one of the things this raises is that, in essence, I believe the club has planning precedent to use those floodlights because they've used them for so long. They're apparently one of the first floodlit set of courts in South London. There's precedence to use them. What there isn't is a cut-off time. So I would argue that those courts can be used at any time of day or night, floodlit, unless it causes, excessive disturbance. But given that they've been floodlit for over 60 years, with very minimal complaints, those raised recently, what the club is offering is actually agreeing to a planning condition of a cut-off time, so that therefore, if in future they're on at 11, then we're in breach of the club is in breach of a planning condition. Whereas at the minute, if they're on till 11, I think it's a difficult argument we are in breach of anything.
Councillor point. Councillor Potts.
And thank you for coming this evening. I think one related point around the pavilion lighting, obviously one of the concerns of the objectives is around the additional number of floodlights on the site, and obviously talk precedents for having floodlights on the site because of practice. But obviously, we're talking about 5 new floodlit paddle courts. I mean, the objective site 35 floodlights. So that's not only just, even if it was consistent with the lighting hours that are currently observed, an addition of 35 floodlights would be quite significant. site, and obviously the argument is that it's further away. Is that something you kind of all recognise?
So one thing was raised earlier, which was, I think it's actually you brought the point and asked whether a lights village diagram had been submitted. It has. Full lighting assessment for all the new courts has been submitted, including light contours and the types of lighting used. They're all fully BS compliant. I can't remember the number of the BS, I'm afraid. They are fully cowled. They have incredibly minimal light spillage. The paddle courts are essentially shielded by 2 railway embankments, and the new tennis courts are in between other floodlit courts that already exist. So, you know, a house is going to see the first set of floodlit courts before they see the ones beyond, and the light spillage all meets all the regulations. So, I think the same argument goes for noise. That the existing courts are the brightest and the loudest object because they're the closest to any neighbouring houses. That makes sense.
Yeah, I see what you mean, but I guess the question is obviously in some of the images that were shared around is that they could see in the image they could see the light. And so if they should, even with the best design in the world, I still kind of envisage there would be additional light in the area that would create a bigger glow on the horizon. That way, actually.
So this is actually a really relevant point. It's a separate application that Andre has acknowledged now is submitted. Throughout this process, it was discovered that during COVID, those floodlights that you saw in the imagery have been replaced from old halogen lights to new LEDs. For various reasons, which this is part of a separate application, it has been discovered that those lights are non-compliant. So the glare seen in those photos is incorrect, essentially. It doesn't meet legislation. So we have the club has put in an application for the removal of those floodlights and replacement with still LED, but fully cowled and in a different layout and setup. So we then ran extra analysis to show how much better they are. So at the minute, those lights as they are have a glare of over 100% of what's permitted, hence they're non-regular. The replacement lights that we've now applied for, and this is a separate application, but it is relevant, have a 2.5% of permitted glare. So we're talking over 100% to 2.5%.
Thank you. Any further questions from the committee? Thank you very much for coming. Sorry, you looked as if you wanted to make a final statement. Go on.
Sorry, turn this on. Which relates to noise mostly. And so as I've described, the club historically has played beyond 10 p.m. on courts 1 to 3 without neighbourly objection. That's happened regularly over the years. Recently, there was a complaint about early play, and the club prevented that early play under lights. They've also implemented their own cut-off point of 10 p.m., which is the time we're talking about. But as I say, that's not regularised in planning, but they've implemented that. The club wouldn't be keen to change that position. The courts have been in use for so long in that way. Were the new tennis courts and paddle courts not to be permitted to 10 p.m, there would be more people playing because there'd be more members after this process. There'd be more people playing on courts 1 to 3 as they exist and have floodlighting until that time. Those courts are closest to the houses and therefore most likely to cause disturbance. One of the things the club has committed to is a booking process like Andre described for the paddle courts to mitigate noise and light for black bats, using courts 2 and 3 especially, which are closest to the houses, booking them last, especially early morning and evening, to take play. Obviously, sometimes all courts will be in use, but often in the early morning and the evening, late evening, not all courts are in use. So to commit to book courts 2 and 3 last, so you're actually removing play from closest to the houses, if that makes sense.
it does bring me to one other question, which I suddenly remember I needed to ask, which was the objectors raised their concern about usage before 8 a.m. And they're concerned that that's been happening, and we wanted to make sure that that sort of 8 a.m. start point was a hard start point rather than things.
So what's actually applied for in the application is floodlit times. So those floodlit times, if approved, would be 8 till 10 p.m. Play on the court in obviously days like this, it's light at 4 in the morning. The club is committed to preventing play before 7 a.m. Historically, again, coaches have started at 6 a.m. and there was a complaint about that, and the club stopped that and started at 7 a.m. So it's two issues. It's play when there's natural light anyway, and play when there's floodlights. But floodlights will be from 8 a.m. But in summer months, play could start at 7 a.m.
Okay, and you'll say how long has the operation of the club been going on from 7 a.m. in the morning?
Well,
So it's been fairly continuous.
Let's say floodlights in 62, and there's been court sessions well before then, with no constriction. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any further questions. Councillor Manuel, I have seen a third question. Councillor Manuel.
But things have changed quite a lot. It's nice to have somewhere to go earlier in the morning if you can't sleep or if you have a problem. But the other people who are working nights, they will need their rest. So 7 o'clock in the morning is when they're coming in to go and have a rest. Or those who are sleeping are trying to wake up at 8 o'clock and you're playing at 7. The noise element of it. Have you checked that out?
I suppose the noise impact assessment shows, and EPT have agreed with it, and then therefore it's up for approval. I suppose if you've worked nights, you might be sleeping all day, but we obviously can't not play during the day.
I'm not saying that, but let me tell you. Let me draw this reference. Maybe you don't quite understand. When they're doing road works, I live on the main road, busy main road. I've learned to block out the sirens and everything that goes up and down. But when somebody comes to do the road early hours of the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, I am really angry because I have to wake up and it disturbs my sleep. So do you think it could be on start at 8 just to,
I suppose again, there's a historic precedent of being able to play early in the morning. Lots of people go and play before work, and therefore get their active sport before their work starts. So I think there's lots of different ways of looking at that, and I refer back to the noise impact assessment that shows that noise towards houses. You're talking about roadworks noise, which is well in excess of the noise generated by a sports club. So I think I've just referred to the fact that the case officer recommendation is for approval, and EPT of that.
Ball courts in some of the estates, and the people always complain the noise of the ball is too much for them, especially certain times. So I was thinking, well, maybe that they have the same impact on the houses that they have in.
I suppose I suspect those ball courts are much closer to the flats than these courts, which are a minimum of 54 metres, and other courts actually 80. So I think it might be a different situation with all due respect.
Thank you very much for coming to answer those questions and presenting to us. If you could return to the public seating area. There is a chance we might have some follow-up questions later, depending on what comes up later. So make you aware of the questions. Thank you. I'd like to ask if there are any supporters of the application that live within 100 metres of the site that would like to speak to us. Thank you. If you would like to take a seat, if you'd like to introduce yourself and describe where you live, but as I said to the objectors earlier, please don't disclose your full address, as we don't want anything as sort of correct or precise address for GDPR reasons.
Thanks very much. I don't mind disclosing my full address. I'm Angus Hanton. I live at 29, the nearest house to the entrance to the sports club.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes in which to address it.
Thank you very much. As I say, I live immediately by the entrance, so I am probably most affected, certainly by traffic. And despite that, I'm very much in favour of this proposal for a number of reasons. It means more sport for young people, so there'll be more facility there. It makes the club more viable, and it's a club that doesn't rely on support from Southwark Council, although it works well with Southwark Council. It creates a community facility. There's a bar and a lot of different activities going on. And I think that sport is good for mental health and enables more people to meet up. So this is my first of 3 points. But I have huge respect for those neighbours who've spoken, Stephen Voss, John English, and those who are represented here, Tyrrell Evans, Paul Barber. But my point 2 is that the club does run successfully a good neighbour policy, and it does confer over things when it has parties. It's conferred over this, even if one or two, as always with these situations, 1 or 2 people may have fallen in the gaps. The project is well led, and I think that's important for a project like this, led by Susie, Greg, Nikhil, Caroline, and particularly Tom Brown, and they've engaged good professionals. So I think, in a sense, the club, the community, and you are in good hands. And it turns out that these things matter, not just the application, but how the thing is run. And I particularly appreciate that they're doing 3 important things for the immediate area. They're increasing biodiversity. They're increasing bike racks. I actually first gave the club a bike rack about 30 years ago, and they were surprised that it was so well used, and they've got a lot more since. And they are improving the pavement crossing, which is right next to my house, and constantly worries me, not for my safety, but for those of children going to local schools, particularly the Dulwich Hamlet School. And my third point is about noise and sound. Like the neighbour John Smith, Turney Road, John and Hazel Smith, they're about 100 metres from the club as well, but couldn't come tonight. They say they like the sound of people enjoying themselves, getting fit, so they're not put off by that. Cricket, football, tennis, and so on. And they say the lights from the noise from the tennis don't disturb them. They're aware of them, but it's not a nuisance, and they particularly are keen on encouraging sport locally. So in conclusion, the council should, I think, support this application, and it's exactly what sports clubs should be doing, making sport available for all and for a very wide range of people. Exactly 3 minutes.
I had it slightly less than that, but so well done. Any questions from members of the committee? No, I think that's really helpful context. So thank you for coming forward to speak to us. I'd like to invite you to sit back in the public seating area. Thank you very much for coming forward. That brings us to ward councillors. I do see ward councillor present. If you'd like to come forward. So, Councillor Newens, I'll allow you to introduce yourself, and then you have 3 minutes in which to address us.
Thank you, and thank you to the committee for being here this long to listen. I'm Councillor Margie Newens. I am one of the ward councillors for Dulwich Village. I had a bit of chance with my balance and something. Shall I begin? Right.
Yes, please begin.
Thank you. So I'd like to start by expressing my thanks to the residents, officers and the applicant for all the hard work they have put in to get this application this far. It's been an exercise of negotiation and compromise, and I hope that the outcome is therefore something that everyone can get behind. The application has much to recommend it, bringing new opportunities and updated facilities to the Dulwich Sports Club in the heart of Dulwich Village Ward. The new facilities will be an asset that I'm sure we much appreciated, including by the large number of local residents who use the club already, as well as by those for whom these additional facilities will offer an added attraction. It's also notable that the application appears to offer significant additional biodiversity net gain beyond the mandatory 10%, which may be unusual for development on existing green space, I think, and it is to be applauded. This improved amenity value is an additional benefit to the entire community and beyond, regardless of their sporting aspirations. Concerns raised by local residents, nevertheless, have to be taken seriously and related mostly to either traffic, floodlighting or noise, and I will comment on these areas specifically. Firstly, traffic. Benchmarking surveys have been carried out on neighbouring Burbage Road and continues to show higher than desirable numbers of motor vehicles passing through, and that's at the moment. Meanwhile, residents have accepted the applicant's projection that the additional traffic generated by the new facilities is unlikely to exceed, in fact, I thought it was 3%, but I heard earlier 4%, and I understand that also is acceptable to residents, and that's the current volume at peak times. I understand that it's been agreed during the discussions with the discussions that the Burbage Road Residents Association will have input into the club's post-development travel plan, and I urge members and officers please to ensure that this commitment is embedded in the decision and followed through. As ward councillors and local residents, we call upon the club to do everything within its power to reduce the number of journeys to the site by motor vehicle and encourage members to travel by public transport and or active travel. With regard to noise, there have been concerns expressed by residents, particularly of Stradella Road and Croxted Road, living near the proposed paddle courts, that the noise impacts are not sufficiently well known. Efforts have been made by the applicant and local residents, nevertheless, including through investigation of comparable sites to better understand these potential impacts. And residents who have contacted me about this have suggested that this further investigation has assuaged some of those concerns. However, this is an area that will need to be monitored once the new courts are in use. And I hope that the provision can be made for that here. Thirdly, there are ongoing concerns, as you've already heard, about the use of floodlighting, and there have been different planning applications, and I'm not going to go into those details here. But to summarise, there remains concern that permitted floodlighting until 10 p.m. at this location will set an unwelcome precedent, both on this site and across the wider Dulwich area. Whilst there is a perception that the viaduct between residents' homes and the club provides some sort of barrier both for noise and glare, this is only really partially the case. And so if you look at this, it's more.
Councillor Newey, 3 minutes is great. I don't know if there's any questions from members of the committee that they'd like to ask at this stage. Councillor Emanuel.
Or anything else?
Thank you very much, Councillor Emanuel. I would be delighted to answer that question. So, as I say, I was talking about the viaduct, and obviously, I mean, it's beautiful for those who haven't seen it, but it's, I mean, it does tend to be a little bit more arch than structure. So it's not really a proper barrier, as perhaps some people would recognise. So whilst there is a perception that the viaduct between residents' homes and the club provides some sort of barrier for noise and glare, this is only partially the case. For these reasons, the request would be to limit the use of floodlights, at least in peripheral areas, until 9 p.m. And I think that again is something that, and if the committee should decide that the not to limit to 9 p.m, perhaps again, which, and I would call upon you to do that, but again, perhaps that's something which you could also flag that needs to be monitored going forward, because obviously we do want to make sure it's not just the floodlights themselves in operation. Obviously, when the floodlights are in operation, play can continue, and therefore that extends not only the possible lighting, but also the potential for noise to be coming from the site, from the sport. I think the thing actually also that was, having said that, on the issue of the glare, I do think it's been acknowledged, I think, by residents and the applicant that the light fittings that were put in 2022 were actually just wrong, and people didn't really realise that. And it's only really, I think, residents sort of, you know, rubbed along and grumbled about it, sort of, but it only came to light, really, forgive the pun, as a result of this planning application. But as I say, it is my understanding that that is something that has been already discussed between residents and the applicant, and hopefully that therefore is resolved. But I would still urge for a 9 o'clock.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Foster.
It's just on the lighting. I think maybe because of the hour we've been going for a while, I'm slightly losing track of this question. This 9 p.m. versus 10 p.m. Is it the case that the 10 p.m. would be a change from now, or for a continuation of the current practice? So, in other words, would we be imposing a condition that would restrict play compared to how it is now? Or would it be the case that 10 p.m. would be an extension beyond what is currently?
My understanding is, and may be something which I would perhaps seek clarification from some people behind me. My understanding is that play has gone on until 10 o'clock, and I think it's possible that some of the floodlighting, I seem to be in receipt of conflicting information here as well, because I listened to the resident talking about this earlier, and there was who stated very emphatically that the lights that they've been planning application in 2018, which had restricted use to 9 p.m. But I'm also hearing that there may have been other lights that were allowed to go on to, or perhaps where the rules were not as specified and therefore they were going on. I think we have an awful lot of sports fields across the ward, and in general, I think the feeling is that if we start extending the use of floodlights in one area, then that will set a precedent, not just on this particular site, but across the ward as a whole, and that would be undesirable.
Sorry, can I just one follow up on that? So, and then thanks, that's useful. And then you had mentioned that, the issues it's been causing, and you saying that this is something that has kind of been flagged by the existence of this application. But I suppose, are you aware that this has been a long-standing historical issue, or is it something where it seems as though the application has kind of occasioned, people to come forward and with this as a problem more so?
I can't say that I was aware of any particular concerns prior to the application, but it's also worth bearing in mind that the application includes it is an application for considerable increase in the amount of floodlighting on the site, much closer to residents, and therefore inevitably, if residents have sort of rubbed along with what was there already, and lived with it, obviously there is a concern that the increased floodlighting will engender further disruption through noise and play, which is generally to be welcomed, but perhaps not quite so late in the evening.
Thank you. I am conscious of time, so I know it's quite very late for everybody. I'm going to ask you one question though, Councillor Newens, which is, we heard from the applicants about this lighting issue, which obviously is really important, where they'd said that they'd had flood lighting on site since 1962, and that flood lighting since 1962 didn't have any restrictions on it at all, and so therefore the application putting a 10 p.m. sort of endpoint on that was introducing a restriction that wasn't there already, and that would therefore potentially be an improvement to people, although I know your point about the overall increase in flood lighting as well.
Sorry, Chair, just on that, I just want to be clear with that there is a planning permission which was change of surface of 2 tennis courts from grass to tarmac and installation of 10 floodlights to match adjacent courts. And those 10 floodlights are limited to 9 p.m. I just checked with the applicant, there's more than 10 floodlights.
There again.
different set of courts. So that application I made and on behalf of the club of court sits in 7. They're in completely different locations. Well, completely. Just behind your head, the yellow square closest to you.
6 and 7, 10 floodlights, those are 9 p.m.
They are, and by adjacent courts, we were referring to the Edward Alleyne courts, the 3 courts adjacent.
So, Chair, I think the position is there's permission, court 6 and 7 currently is limited to 9 p.m. The rest, the applicant is saying, has been floodlit essentially without any restriction since 1962.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, no, so really just take your observations on that, Councillor Newins, in terms of, this application in terms of having an end time of 10 o'clock does introduce a restriction there at the moment.
I mean, that is noted. That is factually correct. Nevertheless, residents who have approached me about this have asked for that cut off at 9 o'clock.
Helpful, thank you. Yeah, that's very clear. Any further questions for Councillor Newins? No, I would like to ask, thank you very much for coming forward. It's really useful always to get ward councillors' perspective on these things. So if you'd like to return to public seating, that's very helpful. Right, that brings us to the end of all the presentations. Are any questions arising for this for officers? Councillor Parton.
Thank you, Chair. I think there was a few points that we talked about at the very beginning about some restrictions and provided involved. Is there a time where those can be discussed about?
This is a very good time.
Yeah, it is. So there's condition 7 is a lighting design strategy that has to be submitted and approved by council. At the moment, that only refers to biodiversity, essentially to deal with bats. But we could add in essentially references to the lighting guidance, British standards. I think the applicant has said that they've done that already. But, to dot the I's, cross the T's.
I think that would be helpful given the experience we've obviously had with the lighting that's having to be changed, which is subject to another application now. Sure, the applicants have learned from that, but I think I'm going to trust officers to come up with the appropriate wording to that. I think given the late hour, I was trying to devise the right wording is probably not the best way of moving forward. Any further questions that members have? Any sort of views that anybody would like to share at this stage of proceedings? No, in that. Sorry. Councillor Salmon.
Thank you. I was going to say I like it. I think what the one resident was saying about encouraging sport and I think the fact that it's been going on for a long time already, the sports centre has been working, in the hours that it's been working, and I wouldn't want to restrict the hours they do, but I would want to see those lights brought in as quickly as possible. I don't know how long the other planning application will take. Hopefully not. And then, I'm just saying that it might be that if we could bring all this together and dovetail it, so that, and also if I can recommend to the applicant, if an incident does occur and the lights do have to stay on later, could you let the residents nearby know that that's what happened before they make a complaint and say the lights were on, and you can say actually, one of the croquet players smacked someone else with a croquet. I'm just saying it can happen. It can happen if you can just keep people informed, because the photographs did show after the hours, and it would be interesting to know why that happened. And I'm sure there was a good reason. But I think you should keep them informed. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other observations that anybody would like to make at this stage? In that case,
I'm very sorry.
Go
I
ahead,
just have a couple points on the wording of conditions. Condition 16, in the addendum report, this is the noise management report. The trigger in the addendum report has been amended from within 6 months of the date of this consent, within 6 months of the commencement of the use is hereby permitted. I think that means in point C, the noise mitigation measures would have to be approved within 6 months of submission rather than within 6 months of the paddle courts.
That's a reasonable. Make sure we're putting that amendment in place. Yeah.
Oh,
And
sorry.
you said you had the second.
The other one was, with Andre, I want to be on the wording of 18 and 19. Conditions 18 and 19 refer to the usage of the floodlit tennis. My understanding is that the conditions aren't limiting the use, or at least that's not what the applicant wanted. They wanted it to limit the use of the floodlights. So it would be the floodlights shall be limited to those times. And then, just so you're aware, in the addendum, there's a proposed condition which essentially says that the new tennis and paddle court shall be limited to a start time of 7 a.m.
Okay. People have. Yeah. Councillor Foster.
Sorry, I didn't understand the saying about the paragraph 37 that you were drawing attention to just the.
Not paragraph 37, paragraph 35 in the addendum.
That I understood.
Yeah.
About that I understood was agreed basically.
Yes. Yeah.
What was it that you said about? I think paragraph 37. You referenced the.
So it's proposed. It's conditions 18 and 19 on the draft decision notice. Page 107 of the report, which says the usage of the floodlit tennis shall be limited to 8 to 10 p.m. Paraphrase. And I think that should say the floodlights, use of the floodlights, rather than the use of the court, because the applicant was saying that they.
I understand.
Yeah.
Now I follow you.
Sorry, it's I think technically it should be in.
In other words, on very bright evenings where you might, people might still be there or whatever. But the important things about the floodlights and.
Well, yeah.
I think we've got that issue, haven't we, about what happens at 7 o'clock in the morning, which we explored. So a court that could be floodlit wouldn't need floodlighting, certainly in the summer. Yeah. Okay, with those.
Okay. Sorry, one more.
Right.
Condition 6, which is the travel plan.
Quite a lengthy one.
It's a lengthy one, and you'll be glad to hear the proposal is to simplify it by just saying that they have to submit a survey every year.
Okay, that seems sensible.
Rather than first, third, fifth, and then every subsequent year.
Yes, that seems slightly arbitrary, doesn't it? I agree. Yes. Just to look at the applicants, that seems reasonable. That you're not be upset by. Right. Thank you very much. Given that, I would like us to move forward to recommendations. So I'd like to move that we adopt the officer's recommendations as set out in paragraphs 1 and 2 of the report on page 25 of the main agenda pack, with those amendments to just considered. So firstly, planning permission be granted subject to conditions the applicant entering into a legal agreement, and secondly, if the requirement of paragraph 1 above is not met by the 6th of January 2026, Director of Planning and Growth be authorised to refuse planning permission if appropriate for the reasons set out in paragraph 263. Does any member wish to say this? Well, Councillor Salmon very quickly there. Don't give me your earlier speech, that makes some sense. I'm going to ask members in turn how they wish to vote on this. So, Councillor Salmon, as Vice Chair, how would you like to vote on it? Councillor Manuel. Councillor Foster. I'm trying to do this alphabetically. 4. Councillor Parton. 4. Councillor Tester.
4, Chair.
Councillor Richard Livingstone. I'm also voting for this motion. The motion is carried, and so the application is granted. That brings us to an end of tonight's proceedings. Apologies for the late hour, but I do hope you have a safe journey home.